Oh.
It just feels way easier tonight than it has for the last couple of times.
Okay. Seeing it's 6 p.m., I'd like to call the March 3rd, 2021 regular meeting of the Kenai City Council to order. I'd like to welcome everybody here this evening. And if you are able, would you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Clerk, please call the roll.
Mayor Gabriel.
Here.
Councilmember Askin.
Here.
Councilmember Glendenning.
Here.
Councilmember Naxtet.
Here.
Vice Mayor Malloy.
Here.
Councilmember Petty.
Here.
Councilmember Winger.
Here.
Mayor Gabriel, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Council, before we get to agenda approval, I'd like to call attention to a laydown you should have in front of you with requested revisions to the agenda packet. Action add to item G7, resolution number 2021-13, public comment requested by the city clerk. Pleasure, Council Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Move to approve the agenda with the requested revisions to the agenda packet listed by the mayor and request unanimous consent.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? Seeing none, the agenda is approved. Next, we'll move to consent agenda. Councilmember Naxtet.
Thank you. I move for approval of the consent agenda. Request unanimous consent.
Second.
Thank you. Is there anybody from the body who'd like to amend the consent agenda at this time? Seeing none, I'll ask the clerk to please read the consent agenda into the record.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Tonight on your consent agenda, you have approval of the regular meeting minutes of February 17th, 2021, approval of bills to be ratified, and introduction of ordinance number 3195-2021, accepting and appropriating funds in the airport fund and accepting grants from the Federal Aviation Administration under the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriation Act 2021 with a public hearing on March 17th. And that is your consent agenda tonight.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Unanimous consent was requested for approval. Is there any objection? Oh, first of all, is there anybody from the public that would like to speak to any item that is on the consent agenda, which was just read into the record?
Anybody on Zoom can unmute or use the raise hand feature. No.
Okay, thank you. Unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? Oh.
I'm sorry, did you say not on the agenda?
Yeah, so, no, on the consent agenda.
Okay.
Yep, so this is just, which was just read into the record. So, any objection to approval? Or unanimous consent, rather? Seeing none, the consent agenda is approved. That brings us to scheduled public comments. This evening we have Tim Dillon, Kenai Peninsula Economic Development District. Public outreach and engagement in the development of Kenai Peninsula's comprehensive economic development strategy. I think we got Mr. Dillon online. Mr. Dillon, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, can we share the screen and you put up my slides, please? First of all, I thank you all very much for giving me the opportunity to come and speak to you. As you probably know, we've got a gazillion and one different things going on, but tonight I'm here to talk to you about the comprehensive economic development strategy, where we are, and what we're doing with it. Next slide, please.
She's adjusting.
I'm fixing the volume,
Okay.
sorry.
Thank you, no problem. As you all remember, the Kenai Peninsula Borough is rather large. So when you're looking at some kind of a strategy that includes the entire borough, we are very, very diverse. And, you know, whether it's Tyonek, Port Graham, Hope, Lowell Point, or Kenai, Alaska, we have to make sure that we're trying to take care of everybody and that we can fit everybody and their concerns and their goals and hopes for the entire Kenai Peninsula under one umbrella, and that's the main goal of putting together this strategy. Next slide. As you all remember who we are, we're not government. We are a private, non-government resource. We look at things on the 30,000 foot level. And again, doesn't matter how many times I say this, I have to remind people that no, we don't work for handouts. We have government contracts or contracts, whether it be with the borough, with the state, with the Denali Commission, with EDA, that's the way we pay our bills, is through all of the different contracts that we have. Next slide, please. What is a comprehensive economic development strategy? Well, what it does more than anything else is it helps with regional planning from an economic standpoint, and it opens up federal funding opportunities. I know, especially over the last several years, people have looked at our SEDS and said, wow, this thing really works, because we could put a variety of different things under it. That's the goal. The goal is not to get into the weeds with this. You're not going to see all sorts of specific projects underneath the overall umbrella. What you're going to see is an umbrella with 5 major goals, and then we're hopefully able to fit the different projects underneath each of those 5, and I can show you those here in a couple of minutes. Next slide, please. So what are we doing? Well, we're doing a variety of different outreach efforts. We started this back in July. We've been doing planning and outreach efforts all over the peninsula, whether it be, Homer or Soldovia, Anchor Point, different tribal organizations, everybody and anybody that we have an opportunity to visit with, because we want people to be able to see themselves in this plan. Next slide. When you look at some of the engagement that we're doing, we're listening to a lot of different people. We're conducting surveys. We actually had a business survey that was out that actually closed last Friday, that we had a variety of people that participated in it from all over the Kenai Peninsula. And it wasn't that we were trying to get everybody to fill it out. We're trying to get a good sampling, and I believe we did that. Currently, we have a residence survey that's out there. All you do is go to kpedd.org, and you can click on it and go directly to the survey. If you're a member of the Kenai Peninsula, we'd love for you to go on there and tell us what some of your dreams are and what you'd like to see the Kenai Peninsula look like in the next 5 years. Next, please. We've had a variety of listening groups, and this is something that has taken a lot of my time, just listening to different groups. You've got all the different major groups, different kinds of industry and businesses throughout the peninsula, whether it's retail, whether it's hospitality, whether it's tourism, medical, nonprofits, fishery, oil and gas, maritime trades, Chamber of Commerce's. We've tried to listen to everybody. I probably, as of tonight, have probably met with a minimum of 45 to 50 different organizations and groups throughout the Kenai Peninsula. And I still have a couple of more weeks to go before I finish up with getting information. And one of the key things is you may be sitting there saying, okay, well, when we look at this stuff, if we've got a comment, what do we do? Well, probably what's going to happen is I'm going to get 3 to 5 emails tomorrow from either people on the Kenai Council or people that are paying attention and listening, just with ideas. Hey, Tim, did you think of this? Did you make sure that this is included or that's included? And that's the goal. We just want to hear from people and make sure that we're heading in the right direction. Next. So as we've gone through things, we've done a typical SWOT analysis where you look at strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Next slide. And as we've done this, we've used some software that's been able to take a look at things. So like the different strengths, and as people have put different comments in, depending on how many times you hear the same comment, that determines how large or how small the writing is. So next slide. You'll notice on this one, broadband is rather large. That's because everybody that we talk to says, Tim, please, if you could list it as a weakness and try and help us with broadband, please put it on the list. And we'll talk about broadband here in a couple of minutes. Next slide. Public transportation is a great opportunity that people see on the Kenai Peninsula. We've heard over and over again that our current system doesn't work and we need help. and that's something that hopefully we'll be able to try and assist with addressing. Next slide. And hold on one second. Let me go back to that one because people have asked me about what do they mean by public transportation. Here's what it boils down to. A lot of our folks that use public transportation have jobs that they go to work Monday through Friday. More than likely, they're making minimum wage. Then on the weekends, they want to be able to go and do other things, whether it be go to catch a movie, go to Walmart, go to Safeway, go to Three Bears, pick up their shopping and do their shopping and things. And there's no way for them to get around on the weekends. So that's one of the major complaints that we keep getting that we're going to try and assist with. Next slide, please. Different threats. You know, we all know it. State budget cuts and things. You know, okay, you flip to the next one. Okay, the strength. So we saw those bigger ones where you just had, you know, a couple of words. Just so that you know, we've also seen when people have emailed us specific information about, okay, like on the strengths. Well, we're the third lowest crime rate per capita in Alaska. We have increased access to affordable energy, vast natural resources across the peninsula. So we're really drilling down on some of those specifics. Next slide. Along those same lines, you're going to see, you know, what are our weaknesses? And again, aging population, lack of coordination and planning borough-wide, lack of affordable mixed-use temporary and seasonal housing. So those are issues that, again, can help us as we are moving forward. Next. Opportunities, there's lots of them. And I can tell you, you know, I've met with your city manager on numerous occasions about a variety of things. And one of the things that we've always talked about is the airport and the things that you all have been able to do. But as you can see, that's identified as an opportunity on the Kenai Peninsula, growth at the airports. So this, again, there are positive things that we can be looking at. Next. And there are some threats. We need to be honest with each other and know, hey, sometimes the fish show up and sometimes they don't. So, you know, natural fluctuations, you can't do a whole heck of a lot about that. Travel limitations, lack of pre-K care, child care. That's a huge issue. And it's not just in Kenai. It's all over the peninsula. So those are all things that we're concerned about. Next slide. So as we take all these things, we look at what is the overall arching goal. And we keep hearing quality of living, quality of place. So our number one thing that we're going to make sure that we continue to do is continue to develop the Kenai Peninsula brand for residents, visitors, and businesses, and promoting expansion of recreational amenities and public access. We're going to keep doing that in a variety of ways, whether it be, you know, I had a meeting today. We got money from the federal government that we're going ahead and doing a video that highlights businesses on the Kenai Peninsula. And what we're going to do is it'll be between 6 and 8 minutes long. And what we're going to do is place it at different hotels around the state of Alaska. Because as we know, 60-some% of the people that move to the Kenai Peninsula are moving from somewhere else in Alaska. So what we want to do is show them the quality of living, the quality of jobs, the quality of opportunities down here. So we've got those kinds of things that we will continue doing in order to move us all forward. Next slide. Then underneath quality of living, there are 5 major areas that we continue to hear over and over again. Technology and communications, and we'll talk about that again in a little bit. Workforce and human capital. I was so pleased that we had 80-some people at our Kenai Soldotna Chamber, joint chamber luncheon here on the 17th when we unveiled our new resource for the entire Kenai Peninsula, being our workforce website. I've gotten phone calls from people all over the state. In fact, most of you probably know, we were mentioned in Forbes magazine here this past month for a couple of the different things that we're doing, but I actually got a phone call from the author after he saw what we had done with this website, and it's really pretty cool. So We're identifying and helping with the workforce side, infrastructure and land use, business climate and entrepreneurship. Heck, we just helped bring almost $200 million since last March, whether it be PPP, EIDL, municipal relief for businesses, the business portion, and then Alaska Cares. Then all the regional partnerships. And again, we do a lot of this stuff. I can't tell you how many times your city manager and I and his staff meet about different potential projects or different potential opportunities, and we look at them and see whether they make sense to Kenai or not. So what we'll do is any of the projects or any of the things that people want, we need to be able to fit them under these 5, especially when it comes to federal funding. Next slide, please. This is what our timeline looks like. We're currently in the public engagement, outreach, and stakeholder engagement. We should have our draft completed sometime in April. Then we'll have a comment period between April and May, and we'll go to the federal government for final approval by the end of June. Next slide. People ask me, why do we need this paperweight? And I tell them, it's really not a paperweight. It's actually a document that's helped us and will continue to help us. There are 4 examples right there on the screen right now. And let's just concentrate on the first one, the earthquake. Once the earthquake happened, there were only 3 places that you could technically spend the money from the federal government. That was in the Valley, it was in Anchorage, and it was on the Kenai Peninsula. But one of the requirements is you had to be an economic development district that was in good standing with the federal government. Part of that is you had to have a SEDS that had been approved and be on file. Well, let's walk our way through the state of Alaska. The Valley does not have an economic development corporation. Although I've been working with the governor's office, the governor asked me if I would assist in helping them develop their own organization. So they didn't even have an organization, and they still don't. Anchorage wasn't getting along with each other. There, as you know, there's a variety of different parts and pieces, and for some reason, their SEDS still hadn't been approved by their assembly and by their administration. So the only place that had an approved SEDS with the federal government was here on the Kenai Peninsula. So when people, especially my board, was asking, why are we helping the Valley? Why are we helping Anchorage? The bottom line was, if we didn't help them, they weren't going to get help. So that's why you have a SEDS. Next slide. We've been working very closely with the governor's office on broadband infrastructure and investment in infrastructure. We've got a variety of different things that we're working on right now. You saw some of the things came out in the Anchorage Daily News here a week ago on some satellite things. There's a variety of other things that are in the mix. I was on a 2-hour conference call with them today with the state. It's not going to be fixed overnight, but I believe that the Kenai Peninsula is positioned very, very well with working with the Denali Commission and the state and USDA that within the next 18 months or so, you're going to see a vast improvement in broadband. And it's huge not only for our young kids and school, but the colleges, AgTech, any kind of training, businesses. We need to make sure that our broadband is upgraded, and we're working really hard on that. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, we have a variety of challenges on the peninsula, and periodically I'll pick up the phone and I'll say, Paul, I've got this going on. I have an opportunity for a couple of cities for us to sit down with XYZ company that potentially is coming through the governor's office. Let's see what we can do. Let's see if it makes any sense. Here a month ago, we actually were talking about erosion with a scientist from down in the lower 48. It actually came to me through the governor's office and through Launch Alaska. And I believe that there's some opportunities that you're going to see with some erosion testing with this program. But at this stage, it looks like it's going to be on the spit down in Homer. But again, I want to make sure we keep these things on the Kenai Peninsula, because what's good for the Kenai Peninsula is good for Kenai, Soldotna, and everyone else, every place else. Next slide. As you can see, you've got a variety of capital improvement plans that are in progress. And if you go back to my 5 goals that we have, you can take every one of these 5 projects and be able to fit them very nicely under the SEDS program. And that's the key, is because you want to be able to put them under there so that when whether it be out of your planning department or out of the city manager's office, when they go writing for a grant, when they go looking for things, we need to be able to identify that it was vetted and that it came through the SEDS program. So any one of those 5 easily can fit under the 5 that we've got identified. Next slide, please. What can you do as a community over in Kenai to support what we're doing? Do what you're doing right now. Continue to go to these kind of activities. I see some people online that I've seen at some of our other meetings. Participate in the surveys. Hey, if you haven't gotten a chance, go to kped.org and take the resident survey. This is a chance for us to hear what you want and encourage participation in your community. Talk to other folks. I try to make sure I follow up whenever I've heard from, one of your council members or one of your community members to try and help. And again, this is a way to, close that loop and make sure that people are being heard. Next slide, please. A couple of things that you want to try and remember, though. Everybody sits here and says, well, we're different. I've heard it from Homer, I've heard it from Soldotna, I've heard it from Seward, I'm sure I'll hear it from Kenai. We're a little different. Yeah, we are different, but we're all the same. And that's what we have to remember when we're trying to put all these things together and trying to move along. It doesn't mean that you have to become something else. That's not what we're saying. But remember that childcare means the same thing to you in Kenai or the folks over in Soldovia or the folks over in Halibut Cove. And we've got to try and fix some of those things. Next slide. Remember, as we're moving forward, don't forget, my job is to look at the bigger picture, and I hope as council members you do the same thing. From time to time, I get frustrated when I see councils and assembly members that are looking so close that when you look at that slide, you understand what I'm talking about, and they forget what the big picture is. Because if you go to the next slide, we cannot forget, we are the size of the state of West Virginia, which is 25,000 square miles. But again, we're not huge when it comes to the whole state of Alaska. Next slide. Thank you all very much. I appreciate your time, your input, and your commitment to what you're doing for the Kenai Peninsula, and especially the city of Kenai. I'd be more than happy to answer questions for you.
Thank you, Tim. Is there any questions for Mr. Dillon? Councilmember Glendenning.
Yeah, Tim, this is one question that's a little off subject, but it's something that we've been working on throughout the past year. And when will the census count and availability be made public so we can make plans here in the political organization of the borough and the city?
Well, if I was a betting man, I would have put $100 down that you were going to ask me that question. So here's my answer, Jim. I'm glad that we finally got the answer that we got here a couple of weeks ago. Originally, it was supposed to be by the beginning of January. Then they moved it back for a month, and then another month, and then finally, Director Dillingham has retired. Plus, with the change in administration, they finally threw their hands up and said to us here on a call 2 weeks ago, don't expect anything before the end of September. So I wouldn't hold my breath on anything right now, Jim. I'm glad they put it out that far because they were just kicking the can down the road 30 days at a time, and they weren't accomplishing anything. So hopefully by the end of September, we'll have something that we can actually talk to you about.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Thank you, Mr. Dillon. Appreciate your presentation. So you're working on a draft update to your SEDS document now, and when will that draft be online, or maybe it is already, and then how will we as a body comment on that? How do you see that happening?
First of all, not a draft of the old one. This is a brand new one from scratch, okay, that we started brand new in June. The goal is for us to have a draft online sometime by the middle of April, and then it'll be online. We will also push it out via the cities and the chambers for comment, and we'll look for comment to wrap up sometime by the middle or end of May, and then we'll have the final draft, which we're going to propose to the federal government. We have to by law by the contract by the end of June.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And just a quick follow-up. So just a comment on the tourism component that you were talking about. I heard a presentation by Alaska Trails Organization at the Borough Assembly meeting, and they're also looking at developing what they're calling the Alaska Long Trail from Seward up to Fairbanks, including, new cabin amenities and stuff like that for it. And so, I'm sure they should reach out to plug in with you. Thanks.
Vice Mayor Malloy, they're actually an offshoot from the original meetings we had a year and a half ago in Seward with Mayor Christy Terry, her council, their recreation department, Ricky Geese, the head of parks, and Jack Blackwell. It's a part of an overall project. I think it's outstanding. And in fact, we had a conference call with Chris Beck and their group. I want to say it was this past Monday, but don't quote me. It was either Monday or last Friday. I'm not positive, but yeah, we're already. They're actually taking direction from us, especially with trying to put together their scope and everything that's going on. The other part too that I'm not sure if you're familiar with is that part of that is actually in the governor's bond package. So the part going from Fairbanks down to Seward, and there's a big chunk that's part of the Seward piece because of the Iditarod Trail.
Thank you.
Councilmember Petty?
Yes, Mr. Dillon, could you share with us who in the federal government approves this document, please?
It goes to EDA, Economic Development Administration.
Thank you. And how long does it take for the turnaround for them to approve it approximately?
They're involved. They're currently involved. In fact, we've got a call with them tomorrow with where we are and what we're doing. Normally, it's not more than 30 to 45 days.
Thank you. Any other questions of Mr. Dillon? Seeing none. Thanks, Tim. Appreciate your time and presentation.
Thank you very much. If individual council members have additional questions about it or want to follow up with any of those things, Vice Mayor Malloy, if you need more information on where the trails thing is going, because there are pieces to it on the western part of the peninsula also, please feel free to reach out to me. I'd be more than happy to assist. So have a great day. And again, thank you very much for giving me the time to speak.
Thank you. Next up, we have unscheduled public comment. And is there anybody from the general public that would like to speak to any item that is not on the agenda or consent agenda? Please come forward. Give your name and address for the record, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilmember, Marty Mativa. My address is 1822 South Birch Lake Road, Big Lake, but I'm here representing Coming Attractions Theaters. We have the Fun Center and the theater. And sort of kind of apropos with Tim talking about the sets, but I just came in, I happened to be in town, and I want to thank you all. I want to thank you for making it easy to do business here. I want to thank you for supporting us. I want to thank city manager and staff for making it very easy for the CARES funding. You guys were probably the easiest to work with. I work with another community. We also have one in our flagship theater and fun centers in Wasilla. And Boy, I'd rather work with you.
Well, that's good to hear.
You guys need to give them some lessons. You're simple, it's clean. It went so far as, on your first round, I didn't file correctly, and staff came back and said, oh, you didn't do this correctly, and there was more money out there, and on the second round, we awarded additional funding for the Flood Center. So I just wanted to thank you and tell you, for your staff here, it's phenomenal. If we could clone them and I could take them back to the facility, I would love to. But I just want to thank you all. It's been a joy and a pleasure. And with the SEDS, that is such an important document because that's what we looked at before we moved here. So anything you do to work with Tim on that, please do. So.
Very good. Would you mind taking any questions or comments? Councilmember Weir.
Yes, I just want to say thank you. I think you're a great asset having in our community. My kids are very thankful to be back into the Extreme Fun Center. I did harass your manager for weeks and weeks and weeks to sign up in the Shop Local program, so I was happy to see that you guys added into that program. We just did back-to-back birthday parties there for our children, so I just again want to say thank you for offering that for our kids.
Oh, well, you're welcome, and thank you. And if I could touch on that, that I think is a great use of creativity through, I think Wallace and his office is working with the chamber because we had our first certificate turned in last week. So I think it's a great way, creative way of using some of the funding that's left over. So thank you very much.
Councilmember Glendenning.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I too welcome your presence, and I think just a little preview. I'm going to take advantage of the voucher program, and I will darken your door, and I'll try and stay away from the buttered popcorn, but I'll have to go to therapy, I think, if I smell it.
Through the mayor, councilman, I just brought 8 bags of popcorn, so we're set for you.
Can we up the ante?
Councilmember Petty.
Sir, it's a pleasure to meet you, and we really do appreciate you coming to our lovely community and investing here, and we wish you the greatest success, and I'm thankful that I had the privilege to meet the man behind the process.
Thank you. I'm not the man, I'm just the part of it. So, but I handle all the escrow operations. Thank you. Very kind.
Any other questions of Mr. Mativa? Comments? Councilmember Nexted.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you for coming and all of that. I don't know if we can clone these guys. We want to keep that, to ourselves a little bit, but that's appreciated. And I want to say that derelict blue building,
Yeah.
I mean, I remember when it was operational up into the, like 80 or something like that, and then it kind of fell off. But, I notice what you've done there every time I drive by. And I noticed it before anything ever happened too, but I really appreciate it now. And the only thing I could say is I wish you would have been here maybe 10 years ago or 12 when my kids were teenagers in home, because we would have, really enjoyed that. And I know that there's a lot of kids that are there now and enjoying it, and I appreciate that. But anyway, thank you for what you do and investing in our city.
Really quick comment on that.
Sure.
Mayor, believe it or not, John Schweiger owns Coming Attractions Theater. He's been in business, in the movie theater business for 35 years. I met him 12 years ago. I live in Wasilla, or Big Lake now. But the theater, John wanted to expand in Alaska. He wanted to buy this theater first before he built one in Wasilla. And it took him 5 years to finally negotiate with Regal to buy that. So this was the community he wanted to come in. So.
Good things take time.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Thank you.
Yeah, and I would just like to say, I appreciate the feedback. It's always welcome, good and bad, but that was, I think, one of the intent of administrations was to make that process very, very easy for folks to apply. And I generally go last, and Councilmember Naxted just grabbed exactly what I commented about was the blue building, and I almost verbatim what I was going to say, because I noticed that every time I go by, we took that you took that building and turned it into, the thriving business, which looks like there's cars out there and kids are having fun, and so certainly appreciate that, being a part of the community.
Thank you. And all local labor too, but
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Mativa.
thank you very much.
Is there anybody else from the general public that would like to speak to any item that's not on the agenda or consent agenda?
Anybody online can unmute or use your raise hand feature.
I think we got Miss Brown coming up here.
afternoon. Brittany Brown, Executive Director for the Kenai Chamber. I just had to say hi to Marty. I knew him back when I worked for Exxon. He was gracious enough, him and his wife, Cheryl, to host us in Nome, my hometown, when I was working for Exxon for the Iditarod. So him and his wife do many things, and that not being the only thing, but it's good to see you. But I'm here tonight to just talk over just an update on the Shop Local program. You were provided with a document that just gives a brief update, two of the numbers as well as a spreadsheet, kind of going over the numbers with the businesses. But first off, I just want to say that the introduction of the grocery program has really made a big impact on the Shop Local program. Contrary to my own belief of kind of overlapping the programs, the grocery program really didn't overshadow the Shop Local program, but instead it really complemented it. People were coming in. I first want to say the grocery program is spreading like wildfire. News about that. We haven't done a ton. It only launched on Monday, so we haven't really had all of that marketing go out. But people are coming in. People are calling. This grocery program. They aren't even saying grocery program. What's the deal about this program? And we say, which one? And then they're like, oh, you have multiple programs? Like, can you explain to me that? And so folks are coming from all over the place. We got somebody from Anchorage. Councilmember Winger was there helping volunteer today when we had our luncheon, and she had a ton of people from different areas coming to participate. So we're seeing a lot of attraction that way. But the Shop Local program began 4 weeks ago, and as of today, we have signed up 55 participating small businesses, and we've had 598 participants. And so that is of this morning. So again, we have all day today. I wasn't able to wrap up to add that to this list before coming here, but we had a significant amount of participation since Monday. But we've administered 543 $100 vouchers and 55 $50 vouchers to qualifying participants. So just to kind of give you an idea of that, that's $57,050 of direct incentives that's been given out to participants or participating businesses. When you break it down and account for the money that consumers are also spending with those qualifying vouchers, the total amount spent in the community pre-tax is $168,400. Now, the last time I came in here, it was roughly $46,000, so that's over doubled. We're seeing, the first 2 weeks. First week was a little rough. We were still getting businesses signed up, so people weren't really coming in. Second week, people were really starting like, oh, we want to learn. Oh, I'm going to go and get more grocery receipts. And so we started to see it pick up the third and then really the fourth week. So you're seeing a majority of these funds coming in now. I do want to say, though, that, with the grocery program, we're seeing people come in to get the information. People are coming back same day, and they're turning in receipts for both programs. Or they're coming in to turn receipts in for one program, getting the information for the other program, leaving, and then coming back same day to participate in that program. And so they're taking, flyers and bringing them out to people. So I really do anticipate seeing a heavy increase in the amount of money that we're going to see going out. You can see from the document that I provided, I know Councilmember Glendenning was wanting to see really kind of where the money was going. And with the purpose of the program, we were looking at giving that money, the intent was going to small businesses who really struggled. And a lot of that from, the chamber perspective was these restaurants, these boutiques, the hair salons, those that really weren't able to have people in their business. And if you take a look at the payout, under some of these businesses, you can really see that a significant amount of the money that has already been paid out is going to those businesses. And so we're seeing a good turnout for that, which is great news. And with an average of, I put in this report 150, but even today, we had in person almost 300 participants. Almost 300 participants come in. And that was, we were there until almost 5:30. We shut the doors at 5, but we had so many people still coming in and knocking on the door saying, please, can we turn these in? And that doesn't even account for what people submitted online. So with the two programs, again, as I mentioned, putting them together, I think that really just kind of boosted the presence of both programs. And people are coming in saying how amazing, it is for the city council to be doing something like this, to not only be supporting the small businesses, but individuals themselves and how thankful they were. There's any questions?
I'm sure there are. Who's up first here? I see all the lights are flying up at once here. It looks like we're landing a plane for crying out loud. Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Ms. Brown, thanks so much for the report and the data. Really appreciate it. And I was over there for lunch, and I want to recognize Councilmember Winger, who was there, volunteering and assisting with it. And boy, the people were stacked up, and we thank you for all your hard work on this. Appreciate it very much.
Councilmember Winger.
I'd just like to say thank you for emailing me and asking me to come in and help with the program. What she didn't mention was there's quite a few pending in the online submissions. When we looked today, there was 411 pending for the Shop Local program, and there was like 65 pending for groceries. So I will be going in tomorrow to help them work on processing all those online ones so we can get those out to people. But I just wanted to share, we've seen people from Ninilchik come in today that normally go into Soldotna to shop, and they bypassed Soldotna and came to Kenai. So we did get some traffic from Ninilchik and Homer that normally go to Soldotna, and they bypassed and came to Kenai. But there was one particular elderly couple that was really impactful, and I want to share this with you guys so that we understand the impact. They had a house fire last fall, and that set them back. And then they got in a car accident, rear-ended by a motorhome that they had to do the repairs on. And then a month after that, they were driving to Anchorage and lost control on the road and did a 360 and got hit, and it totaled their vehicle. And so this was her, as she grabbed my hand and said, this is her breath of fresh air. This is what's helping them to kind of dig out at the first of the year and get ahead. So she was able to get a lot of things that they've been not able to get for their household because finances for paying all those devastations have really impacted them. And so the elderly lady was like my great grandma. She was almost in tears, just saying how great and that this is her breath of fresh air going into the new year. So I just want to say thank you for working hard on that program.
Thank you. Councilmember Glendenning.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Yeah, this, I'll chime in a little bit. These programs are giving people a breath of fresh air and hope. Thank you.
Any other questions?
And also, there's a question in here. Could you, being an old major catalog rebuyer, okay, you have certain pages, your merchandising, you have your item there, okay, and then you project the sales and you project how much product you have. And the goal is not to have omissions, unless you're on the fashion side of it. Then you want to sell out of it all the time because people don't want to see each other coming down. But that's merchandising 101. Could you please stay side by side with our city manager and project the exhaustion of these funds and see if we need to make some adjustments along the way? I know Councilor Naxted had mentioned that way back up the ladder, just to see, how we are doing. If you give us a reading on that, then we can maybe be creative and proactive. I appreciate that.
Through the mayor. Yes, I can work with Paul on trying to get some more information.
Thank you.
Any questions or comments? I do have one question, Ms. Brown. So in this list here, it shows that where the vouchers were spent at. Are there other businesses that aren't on this list, or is this all inclusive of the number of businesses that have signed up?
Mayor Gabriel, this is the businesses right now that have been paid.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's other businesses out there. We'll hopefully see those vouchers kind of funnel through there. So. And yeah, other than that, I'd just like to echo everybody else's comments and appreciate the work you do over there. And and particularly in this program, because I do think it's a benefit to, again, our businesses, but also our local residents. So, thank you. And these are very, very helpful. I appreciate you coming before us and giving us updates.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Is there anybody from the general public that would like to address the council at this time on any item that is not on the agenda or consent agenda? All right, seeing none, we'll move to public hearings. First up, item D1, ordinance number 3192-2021, increasing estimated revenues and appropriations in the general fund, Parks, Recreation, and Beautification Department, and authorizing an increase to the multi-purpose facility management services purchase order to Redline Sports for additional ice maintenance services. Pleasure of council. Councilmember Naxted.
Thank you. I move to enact ordinance 3192, 2021.
Second?
Is there anybody from the general public that would like to speak to ordinance number 3192-2021? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to council. Comments from council? Councilmember Glendenning.
Yes, this is as a result of our increased, how can we say, proactiveness, that's a word, regarding the hockey community and making ice available and actually being inviting for surrounding hockey teams to come. This is as a result of increased interest and usage. Is that why we're doing this?
Mr. Ostrander, I got it.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel, Councilmember Glendenning. Yes, significant additional use, particularly in January and February, when we were the only ice rink that was open. We saw a significant increase in the amount of use, far beyond what we had expected and what was budgeted during the fiscal year. So this will appropriate additional funds to allow us to get through the end of the year. I will tell you, this has been a real moving target. Mr. Frades is here to speak to it further, but even today, we expected having to have an amendment to increase this another $5,000 because of the additional use. We ended up pulling that amendment at the last minute because we think that this additional $15,000 is going to be enough to get us through the remainder of the year, because it appears that the last state hockey tournament that was scheduled to be at our rink has now been moved to Soldotna. Certainly, Mr. Frades worked extraordinarily hard to keep it here, but in the end, out of our control, they ended up moving to Soldotna, so we didn't need to do the additional appropriation. But regardless of that, the additional use this winter, we will see significantly higher revenues, but also commensurate expenses as well. Overall net revenues of the rink is significantly up for the year.
Thank you.
Councilmember Naxted.
Thank you. I guess it's a good thing we got to spend more money because of the additional use. But the $15,000, I was wondering if you could, provide a basis of how that number was determined, why it wasn't 10, why it wasn't 20. Those kind of things, and then in there it says the whereases that the maintenance, or that the ice sales exceeded other costs, and I was just wondering what that meant, how much that exceedance is, roughly, if you have that.
Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Councilmember Naxted, I'd actually like Mr. Frades to come up and give some of those specific numbers. I will tell you that the contract, the way that it is written right now, they bill us on a time and materials basis. So there's an hourly wage that we pay them, and at the beginning of the fiscal year, we estimate how many hours it will take to maintain. As ice usage increases, the amount of hours that they have to spend maintaining it increases as well. So in the case of this year, historically what we saw as far as usage, we would have had enough budgeted, but since we exceeded that by such a significant amount, the amount that we had budgeted wasn't sufficient. I believe the hourly, and Bob can provide you what the specific hourly amount is for those maintenance services, but again, they're significantly higher this year than what we've seen in the past.
Mr. Frades.
Yes, through the mayor. I was going to say, first of all, we have the fun center off of Willow, but then we have the Fun Center off of Rogers Road. And it's been a wild ride with COVID, and there's been a lot of shuffling and jockeying around with all the leagues throughout the state with the closures and restrictions and so on and so forth. So best I could, these are projections, but just looking at to answer the first part of your question, Councilman Maxted, we do have the February actuals now. We've been billed for that, so I know what those costs are. So now it's just a matter of projecting what our March, hours are going to be. I was going to say, in a typical season, we're at 500, 550 hours. This winter, we're going to be a little north of 800, almost 900 hours. That's a huge, huge increase. And the cool thing, if I may, about that is the common thread with all the calls that I get and some of the things that I deal with every day are a lot of calls to thank administration, thank you folks, council, for keeping the rink open. So again, thank you. So second part of your question, I'm not sure if this answers it, but just running the projections, we're looking at a total revenue of 120, almost 130,000, 128,000. And so of that, the ice maintenance expense is going to be about 61,000. So it stands to reason in the hockey world, and through the mayor, you know this, the more, it's not a, if I will, or if I could, it's not necessarily a one-to-one ratio. So in other words, you don't just have an hour in ice, an hour in maintenance. The more ice you have, the more ice sales you have, your maintenance cost is going to go up proportionally, just because there's more maintenance that needs to be done to the ice, just in terms of restoring the ice. It's the edging and the scraping and all of those things that go into maintaining the ice. So
Thank you for that, that explanation. A percentage or something, in the whereases, I was kind of left at a little bit of a blank there, and appreciate that. And Mr. Ostrander for what you said. That's a clear mathematical calculation how it works out. So I appreciate both responses.
Councilman Warrior?
Yeah, I just want to touch on what Bob had said. We've been flooded with emails from the hockey community showing their support for us keeping things open. My understanding is, talking to some of these coaches in these youth hockey leagues, they plan to make Kenai their priority for ice time next year. So they do plan on trying to book with us primarily, then secondarily with Soldotna. So now that they know that there might be, the more ice time they get, there might be a projection in the future of getting the locker rooms that they're wanting. It gives them more of that incentive to book with us so that we can continue to grow that facility for them as well, and they're aware of that. So again, I just want to say thanks to the entire body from these parents and these players, and thank you, Bob.
thank you.
Councilman Glendenning?
Just a question about the facility itself. Are we in good shape on the refrigerant, the coolant, the ice-making solution?
Mr. Freitas?
Yes, sir. Yeah, we are. Yeah, no worries there. We purchased some extra Freon, this early fall, and I don't think that we've gone through all of it yet. So we're fine. Yep.
There were issues with pumps or some mechanical device regarding the refrigeration system. That's resolved also.
That's resolved. Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions of Mr. Freitas or administration? See none, yeah, I'd like to just say, thanks for that. And I've gotten a lot of, some folks touching base with me in the hockey world that are we're happy to see us, keep that rink open and, accommodate their needs, because especially with school being closed, that was one outlet for those kids to be able to get out with their buddies and socialize, and recognizing how important that was. And Mr. Ostrander and I I think it was back in November, we had a situation where some teams were coming down for a tournament, and they were, getting like, hey, is this going to be open? And, we could have, we made the call to go ahead and let them do their tournament. And, that was, at the time you make those calls, you don't know, but you try to do the best information you can. And I think that was part of that payoff, and it was certainly appreciated by the hockey community.
Well, we're certainly glad you didn't treat it like the 4th of July.
I'm gonna tell, I feel like I need to almost comment on that, to be honest with you.
Just show your whip marks.
I
that's
can
okay.
honestly say that I'm still bummed that we didn't have the parade, and I think we could have pulled it off at the time, made the best, I thought was the best decision for what the information we had, but certainly, moving forward, I think we are gonna be having one this next July 4th.
And just one more thing, if I will, through the mayor, none of this really would happen without Red Line Sports or, the contractors over the rink. Just do a pretty decent job keeping things going and very particular about the ice, and so, kudos to them.
Thanks, Bob. Any other comments, deliberation? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Mayor Gabriel?
Yes.
Councilmember Askin?
Yes.
Councilmember Glendenning?
Yes.
Councilmember Naxtet?
Yes?
Vice Mayor Malloy?
Yes.
Councilmember Petty?
Yes.
Councilmember Winger?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Council, we're on item D2, ordinance number 3193-2021, accepting and appropriating an increase in the Title III grant from the State of Alaska Department of Health and Social Services for nutrition, transportation, and support services, and a grant from the United States Treasury passed through the State of Alaska Department of Health and Social Services to support the Kenai Senior Center's response to COVID-19 public health emergency. Pleasure, Council. Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Move to enact ordinance number 3193, 2021.
Second.
Is there anybody from the general public that'd like to speak to ordinance number 3193-2021?
Anyone on Zoom can unmute or use the raise your hand feature.
Thank you. Seeing no public comment, we'll bring it back to council. Councilmember Naxton.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank Kathy Romaine on these, achieving these grants. They don't just happen. She obviously did some preparation, and here it is. And it's greatly appreciated. Good work down there.
Councilmember Glendenning.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Yes, it's good to verbalize this to our folks in Radio Land that our Senior Center Director, Kathy Romaine, is working very hard in searching out all of these grants and funds for the nutrition, transportation services that we do provide, in addition to others. And it's well recognized throughout the community, and I just want to say thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments from council? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Askin?
Yes.
Councilmember Glendenning?
Yes.
Councilmember Naxtet?
Yes?
Vice Mayor Malloy?
Yes.
Councilmember Petty?
Yes.
Councilmember Winger?
Yes.
Mayor Gabriel?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Council, we're on item D3, ordinance number 3194-2021, accepting and appropriating insurance proceeds for damage to well house number 1 in the Water and Sewer Capital Projects Fund, authorizing a budget transfer in the Water and Sewer Special Revenue Fund, Water Department, and appropriating the estimated residual amount needed to relocate the damaged facility to the Water and Sewer Complex on Shotgun Drive in the Water and Sewer Capital Projects Fund. Pleasure, Council. Councilmember Naxton.
Move to enact ordinance 3194-2021.
Second.
Is there anybody from the general public that would like to speak to ordinance number 3194-2021?
Anyone on Zoom can use your raise hand feature or unmute.
Seeing none, we'll bring it back to council. Comments, deliberation from council. Councilmember Naxton.
Yeah, I want to say that this is an easy one to support. One question I do have for the city manager, it did mention that the lot that where well house 1 is now is leased from the state. That well is going to be abandoned, the building's going to be moved. What's going to be the status of that lot in the future? Are we going to continue leasing it?
Mr. Ostrander.
Through the mayor, Councilmember Naxted, at this point, I would assume once we abandon the well and are completely off of that site, that we would look to terminate that lease. I have not looked into the terms of the lease to figure out what our options are there. We've really been focused on just on this project first, but if possible, we'd look to terminate it because there's no use for the city once we do abandon it and completely vacate that site.
Any other discussion on ordinance number 3194-2021? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Glendenning?
Yes.
Councilmember Naxtet?
Yes?
Vice Mayor Malloy?
Yes.
Councilmember Petty?
Yes.
Councilmember Winger,
Yes.
Mayor Gabriel,
Yes.
Councilmember Askin.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Council on item D4, resolution number 2021-10, authorizing the city manager to execute a professional engineering services agreement for the Kenai Water, Sewer, and Wastewater SCADA programming services. Pleasure, council. Councilmember Glendinning.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Yes, I move for adoption of Resolution 2021-10.
Second.
Is there anybody from the general public that would like to speak to resolution 2021-10? Very good. Seeing no comments from the public, deliberation, comments from council. Councilmember Naxton.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I do have a question for Mr. Ostrander on the scope of the work, and the funds, what they go to. It's not just to HDL, they have a consultant, but I'm not sure how much programming, or if this really pays for all of the SCADA and equipment. If you could kind of explain how that works.
Mr. Ostrander.
Through the mayor, Councilmember Naxton, actually, Mr. Curtin is online, and he can do this better justice than I can, so I'll pass that on to Scott.
I see that. Mr. Curtin, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through the city manager. Councilman Nextet, thank you very much for the question. As you know, HDL Engineering was awarded the overall contract back on May 6th through passage of Resolution 2020-24. Borealis Controls is the sub-consultant that does the SCADA work. They do the actual design as well as the integration. So, and this does include a little bit of both. So we've been working on assessing our current infrastructure. We have bought a small amount of replacement equipment to replace outdated equipment, and we're in the process of doing that. So it's a little bit of both. It's not just design work. It is actually some implementation work that because of the situation surrounding how it was contracted, that Borealis Controls was able to do that.
Thank you. I appreciate the response, and it also included another question I had that you answered, and that was that the contracted, when it was let or was advertised, that this is just a continuation of what was already reviewed. So the numbers aren't renegotiated. It's part of the ongoing contract. That's correct?
That's correct. So when we put out the initial RFP, we actually included the capital improvement plan with the water, sewer, and wastewater projects that were known at that time. So we had that in, even though we didn't have clearly defined scopes of work yet, we knew that we were going to be addressing those projects. Now, their agreement does allow us to move forward with projects as we define them, as we move through the terms of the agreement. But this particular SCADA programming, SCADA integration, the sludge press, as another example, those were all pre-identified originally during that RFP process.
Thank you.
Any, Councilmember Glendinning.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Yeah, just a question about the design of the system. As the SCADA is being installed, it's expandable, right, to integrate future capacity and future pieces of equipment. And are you able to, with this, now be able to remotely perhaps observe from your kitchen table at breakfast what's going on at the wastewater plant, or is it just confined to hardwire within the facilities?
Mr. Curtin.
Councilman Glendinning, thank you very much for the question. And yes, we're not there yet. Our water treatment plant is our most updated facility, and the SCADA that we have on that property is the most current. What we're doing right now, all of the systems kind of work together. They all report back to one primary base. So the water plant, our lift stations, and our wastewater plant, they all go through common equipment. And right now we're focusing on identifying all of our existing systems and replacing the primary piece of equipment that all of those are shared with. And absolutely, it's all fully expandable. We are on a path of getting certainly more monitoring capability. so that absolutely, so you could sit on an iPad or from a laptop from home. We can do some of that right now, but we can't see 100% of our facilities. So we're in the process of kind of updating as we go.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I see this as a milestone in our project scope, and thanks for keeping us updated.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Questions? Oh, Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I just wanted to expand a little bit on what Mr. Curtin said. So just so council understands, this is likely the first step in a much larger project. Our SCADA system is quite outdated, and there's a lot of assessment that's going to be going on with this first tranche of money. And this is likely a much larger project to get our SCADA system up to where it really should be. So just so council's aware, you're likely to see more legislation coming before you looking for additional money to get our SCADA system where it really needs to be.
Thank you, Mr. Ostrander. Any further discussion, comments from council?
Request unanimous consent.
Thank you. Unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? Seeing none, resolution number 2021-10 is adopted. Brings us to item D5, resolution number 2021-11, approving the use of the fleet replacement fund for the purchase of a 15-passenger van for the Kenai Senior Center, utilizing State of Alaska equipment fleet contract. Pleasure of council. Councilmember Glendenning.
Yes, I move for adoption of resolution 2021-11.
Second.
Is there anybody from the general public who'd like to speak to resolution number 2021-11?
Anyone on Zoom can use the unmute feature or raise hand.
Seeing none, we'll bring it back to council. Discussion, deliberation from council. Councilmember Glendenning.
Yes, this is a question for City Manager Ostrander. Could you just bring us up to date on how this transit van fits in with our equipment replacement and the projected use of it? And I see from a item that was handed to me at the chamber today, we are starting now to get our van usage going with meals delivery, but more importantly, medical appointments, and it's just a matter of manning to bring it up to traditional capacity. Is that correct?
Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel, Councilmember Glendenning. Yes, the transportation program at the Senior Center really has been non-existent since COVID began, but beginning in this month, we're going to start providing transportation services again. In regards to the purchase itself and how this fits into the fleet replacement plan, Council, I'm sure recalls last year, we went through an active process to reduce our overall fleet so that we could reduce operation and maintenance costs of our fleet. We had 55 vehicles citywide when we started the process, and we reduced that total number to 40, significantly reducing the amount of cost that we have in maintaining and operating those vehicles. Along with that, we were able to move money from the equipment replacement fund and capitalize this fleet replacement fund that allows us to continually update our fleet, keep it small, keep it efficient, but they're much safer and newer than they would be otherwise. So this is part of that process. This was scheduled to be replaced this year. This one in particular, this is one vehicle that is actually replacing what used to be 3 vehicles. So we're surplusing 3 senior vehicles, replacing it with this one. Earlier, actually last calendar year, but earlier in this fiscal year, you'll recall that we purchased 2 vehicles for the fire department through this plan, and also 3 police vehicles. So this is actually the 6th vehicle we purchased through this plan. This vehicle actually is a part of the plan. And as you recall, what we tried to do was structure it so that we could get these vehicles in a department that would likely utilize them a lot more miles per year. And once they were at a certain age, transfer them to another department who doesn't use them as much. In this case, this van is intended to be used at the Senior Center for 10 years. They will put a significant number of miles on that per year. It will then transfer to building maintenance, who puts a lot fewer miles on it, but they're scheduled then to use that for the next 10 years. So this vehicle is supposed to have a 20-year life, 10 years with the Senior Center, 10 years with building maintenance, try to maximize it so that when we do go to surplus it, we're not surplusing a 20-year-old vehicle that has 30,000 miles on it. We're surplusing a 20-year-old vehicle that has 150 or 160,000 miles. So again, this is part of that larger plan that council adopted, and we're really excited with the way that it's going so far, and that it's keeping our fleet small and also efficient and safe for our employees.
Thank you. Councilmember Winger. Oh, I'm sorry, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, no, I was just saying that somewhere in the question and response, it's to be affirmed that our program at the senior center will be functional in the near future, and the van will be fully utilized.
Mr. Oshner.
Yeah, through the mayor, Councilmember Glendening. Yeah, sorry, I guess I skipped over that a little bit. Yeah, so the lead time on this van is about 4 to 5 months. So we won't actually get receipt of this van for about 4 months. And we are fully hopeful that by the time we do receive this van, that the transportation program will be fully back up to where it was pre-COVID.
Councilmember Winger.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to say I think the Fleet Replacement Fund has been a great asset. I'm not sure among administration who really came up with that. I'm going to assume it was kind of a mix between Terry and Paul. So I think this is a really valuable fund. I like the way that we do this. I do appreciate getting to sit down with Kathy after the chamber and really diving in deeper on this. Obviously, when we start surplusing and doing things that predate us, we need to be brought to speed on the old business. So I do appreciate with her sitting down and talking to me about this. This is something I definitely will be supporting, but I do just want to mention that they are in need of volunteers and drivers. That is a lot of the hiccup when it comes to this stuff is not actually having someone that's cleared a background check that's willing to put in the 14-hour shift or the 40-hour shift. That's just one thing I wanted to mention, that they still, even if we give them the vehicle, they still need the driver. So, thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Yes, I'm also pleased to support this and to see that we're getting a replacement van in a few months, and more importantly, that the program will be winding up again soon. You know, in addition to medical appointments, I've also seen seniors at other professional services for appointments, you know, other law firms, mine, et cetera. And it's a great service for them to, you know, be brought to an appointment and then come back and picked up later and taken home. So it's a wonderful thing that's done. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions of administration? Any other discussion? Councilor next.
Consent?
Very good. Unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? Seeing none, resolution number 2021-11 is adopted. Next up, we have resolution number 2021-12, a resolution of the Council of the City of Kenai, Alaska, approving development incentives per Kenai Municipal Code 21.10.100, temporary development incentives for lease of airport reserve lands between the City of Kenai and SOAR International Ministries on Tract A2, General Aviation Apron Subdivision 1. Pleasure, Council. Councilmember Naxton.
Well, thank you. I move for adoption of Resolution 2021-12.
Second.
Is there anybody from the general public that'd like to speak to resolution number 2021-12? Anybody online? Very good. Seeing none, we'll bring it back to council. Comments from council and deliberation. Council Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Yeah, I definitely support this. It's good to see this happening. And it's interesting that this fits in with the presentation that you and the city manager made to the chamber, you know, today about how the development incentives that administration and council worked on are having a benefit. And so happy to support this. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other? Oh, Councilmember Glendening.
Yeah, I'm just going to chime in. It's good to see that a building has been in existence, perhaps almost as long as I've been here, being shown some attention and maybe refurbished and being dedicated to airport usage. I think it speaks well of our airport administration and actually Councilor Naxted for working so hard on the airport industrial scheme, the zoning of it. it lends itself to applications like this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Nexton.
Yep, I too, to support this, and like to also point out, there's 3, maybe 4 other hangars that are proposed, you know, over the next year or so. So there might be some incentives for those too. And that may be why we're seeing some influx there at the airport. So I do appreciate this.
Further discussion? I do have a question of administration. So just for clarification, because there wasn't a Google Earth map or anything included in this package, but is this the old Kenai Fabric property?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. This is actually the vacant lot along Willow where SOAR is proposing to put in an FBO.
Okay.
So this is a separate lot from that.
Okay, just want to get the...
Directly adjacent to the terminal building parking lot.
Okay, very good.
Request unanimous consent.
Very good. Unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? Seeing none, resolution number 2021-12 is adopted. Next up, we have resolution number 2021-13, requesting the U.S. Secretary of Commerce veto the North Pacific Fishery Management Council's adoption of measures that will close commercial salmon fishing and Cook Inlet exclusive economic zone. Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Move to approve resolution number 2021-13.
I'll
Second.
second that.
Thank you. Is there anybody from the general public that would like to speak to, I believe we have Mr. Ma here that would like to, I'm guessing, speak to this resolution? Should give your name and address for the record, please.
For the record, my name is Roland Ma. I'm with United Cook Inlet Drift Association. First off, Mayor, council members, thank all of you for doing this. Thank you for providing comments to the October and the November or the December meeting of the council, the North Pacific Fishery Management Council. It's very, for me, it's very rewarding and very more than interesting that as we look across our nation, there's a number of governments that have clouds hanging over them. But the bright spot occurs here. You are doing the public's business, and thank you for it. And I'm fully in support of this resolution that's before you. If I could make some comments.
Absolutely. Yep.
Want to just spend some comments about the alternatives, and that's in the covering memorandum. Number one is the status quo, and just a little bit of a history. Of course, Alaska was approved in 1959. The Magnuson Act came along in 1976. So there was a period of 15, 16, 17 years where the state of Alaska was managing fisheries, some well out offshore, including the crab fisheries in the Bering Sea and the pollock fisheries and our cod fisheries. And then Magnuson came along, and one of the requirements of Magnuson was that you have to develop these fishery management plans. So the North Pacific Council did that in 1979. And basically, that plan was stamped what the state of Alaska was doing without regard to what Magnuson Act was saying. So for a period of time, Alaska was doing its business. Then Magnuson come along and said, gee, you know, there's some new requirements that are required here. And the council, meaning the North Pacific Fishery Management Council, went ahead and, as I said, adopted a plan. And in the words of the council chairman, and in my interview with him years ago, was that oh, we just turned everything over to the state. But that wasn't what Magnuson was about. There were some national standards. Well, time moves on. I see my time's out. Time moves on, and in 1990, the salmon FMP for Alaska was updated, and they used an interesting term. It was called the federal government was going to defer to the state of Alaska. The problem there being is that nowhere in the act is the word defer used. You can delegate, but you can't defer. And we raised that issue, UCEDA raised that issue with the council, and so they went ahead and adopted a new amendment called Amendment 12. And that's the amendment that we took to court, because that amendment basically put in place the same thing that had been going on since 1959 without regard to Magnuson. And Amendment 12 was found to be contrary to law. And that's why Alternative 1 is not a viable alternative. The courts have already ruled Alternative 1, you can't do it. It's contrary to law. Alternative 2 is what we ask for as an industry, and that would be that these two governments, the state of Alaska and the federal government, would work together and cooperatively manage these fisheries with these national standards. Let's get into compliance. And that seemed to be the case. Alternative 3, and we did not support Alternative 3, which was just turn everything over to the federal government and let them do everything. We found that to be quite objectionable. Alternative 4 is an interesting one. That didn't come to the table until the last 30 or 40 days before the salmon FMP was to be adopted. And that it actually came to the table at the council on October the 10th. We did not get, or about the 20th, I'm sorry, October the 20th. We didn't get the writing on that until November the 10th. Council then, North Pacific Council, went ahead and adopted and selected Alternative 4 on December the 10th. The reason I go through that timeline is that this thing appears, Alternative 4 appears, and is adopted virtually within a 30-day period. And we felt that was, and a lot of other people felt that was an injustice to the public participation process, let alone its content. So anyway, I know I've gone over my time, but thank you. Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Which was Councilmember Winger.
I just want to say thank you for getting up here and giving us that back history. I do appreciate it. So thank you for speaking.
Thank you.
Councilmember Nexted.
Thank you for coming tonight. And since we have you, if you want to speak, if you can speak freely on Alternative 4, which when I saw it, I thought, well, that could never happen. Sometimes when you look at alternatives in other worlds, I mean, you look at this is ridiculous to this, so it's somewhere in the middle. Well, it was over here. Did they give any justification for that other than just adopting it? Was there any science behind it? Any monetary? Anything?
Through the mayor. When Alternative 4 was put on the table, we had heard some rumors that it was going to be put out as an alternative. So we made a number of inquiries that go directly to the point that you're asking. This is where things get a little dicey. there was an undertaking by some people in the Department of Fish and Game that said, no harm, no foul, we can close that entire area, basically from the Nilchik south down to Anchor Point, because we can effectively harvest these fish north of that area along the shore. So they were making a statement that they could effectively harvest these fish within 5 or 6 miles of the shore. We disagreed with that, because that would mean then that all the salmon stocks that move through the center of the inlet will never have any harvest on them at all, which could be another motivating factor for some parties. But the bottom line is, and it's pretty clear what went on in 2020. The fleet was kept out of the middle of the inlet most of the season, matter of fact, almost all of it. And that is up for an economic disaster declaration with the Secretary of Commerce and with the governor. The average drifter in 2020 gross income was about $4,400, which was, I'm one of those guys. You can't even maintain a boat with that kind of income. And so I really, that's not a future that I'd ever envisioned either, but here it is. And we will try to work as best we can in the system, and if we have to, in the courts, to make sure that that's not our future.
Any other, Councilmember Glendenning?
Oh, I just want to thank you for coming tonight and educating us a little bit. I'm an old oil guy, but my family actively worked in the fisheries, mostly with the beach fishers, but and I held a crew license. I'd go out with the drifters a little bit just for fun. I have an appreciation of it, and maybe more realistically, I know just enough to be dangerous. So that's why I'm glad you have come here and given me some background and talking points should I be asked about it, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Any other comments from council? I do have a question, Mr. Ma. So I had a teleconference with Governor here a couple weeks ago, along with Mayor Kastner from Homer, regarding cooking at fisheries, and this was probably one of the primary topic of discussion. There was other discussion about Tucker Bay hatchery and management of cook inlet fisheries, because one of the questions I have is, you guys, quite a bit of the Kenai harvest and Casita harvest takes place in this area, and if you guys don't harvest them, what's your plan? Because, if I don't have a lot of faith that there's going to be extra fishing time in the sednet fishery to harvest the excess. But regardless of that, what happened was they made a comment. I think this was probably mentioned right after the decision, was that they were going to go back and change the language in Magnuson-Stevens. So next year in 2021, it's going to be status quo. This would, as if it was signed by the secretary, would take effect in 2022. So I think their thought process was they're going to go to Magnuson-Stevens and change the language to allow fishing within the EEZ. I guess my question to you is, I've heard comments that that's problematic and probably difficult to achieve. Would you care to comment on that?
Yes, Mayor Gabriel. We've come across that correspondence that, in fact, has gone to the congressional delegation, suggesting just a one-word change in Magnuson. In my view, and I think in the view of most commercial fishermen, that one-word change is is a very poor one. And what they're attempting to do is insert the word federal in front of, it has to be a federally managed fishery. Otherwise, the state can do that. One of the things that happened when the original Magnuson Act, Senator Stevens came on about 6 years later in the name of the act. But when Senator Magnuson did that, I went back and read the congressional record, I read the committee hearings, that there was a number of problems that they were having nationwide that dealt with anadromous stocks. And some of those anadromous stocks would be, you would maybe identify with, were the lampreys in the Great Lakes. We probably have all had that lesson somewhere in school along the way. Well, those lampreys came in 1939, and Magnuson now. And so how do you handle the lamprey problem? And by the way, they're anadromous. Well, there's 22 states around the Great Lakes. And that is such a monumental problem that was going to require a coordinated approach. So and then you've got the sturgeons along the whole East Coast, the West Coast. We have them here in Lake Iliamna, by the way. Sturgeons were in there, herring, the forage fish. And then the other group was the highly migratory species, the tunas, offshore. And so and this is part of the record that I'm referring to, they said, gee, you know, when it comes to anadromous stocks, we need a federally coordinated approach about how we're going to manage them. And so they did that. And so the word anadromous was put in, and it was to include the areas that they feed in, their habitats, but also the rivers, the streams, and the estuaries, and the freshwater systems. Otherwise, you can't get at the lamprey problem without that kind of an issue. And salmon just happened to be anadromous, and they got put on the list. And that's a bit more of a history lesson, and that's what the North Pacific Council tried to do, was to take Alaska out of that list. But virtually every coastal state of the United States, including Alaska, has many anadromous stocks. And so if you take that one word and stick it into the act, Washington's going to say, pick me. Alabama is going to say, pick me. Each one of these, and guess it comes right up around the Great Lakes. Michigan will say, pick me, I want out. And that will virtually gut Magnuson. And that's why we, you know, if there's some surgical way of doing it, where we can have some co-management, great, we're all in. And that's where we're at, trying to get there.
Thank you. Any further questions of Mr. Ma? Councilmember Naxton.
You might not be the one to ask the question, but this whole resolution is written really to go to the U.S. Secretary of Commerce. I don't know who that person is, or what their power is, and apparently that person can unilaterally make this decision, or not. I don't know, and I'm not sure what our congressional delegation has as far as a hammer to help us out with that, because I know that they're aware of it. And maybe I'm just kind of asking what the general politics of how, I'm happy that we're going to do our part as a council here, and I know we're a little piece, but effectively, how is that going to function out there as we're part of that push?
Through the mayor. The Secretary of Commerce was just approved by the Senate 2 days ago, and that's the former governor of the state of Rhode Island, who is a coastal state, who has worked on fishery issues. This will not be lost on her. listening to her testimony and some of the staff that she is in the process of picking to work around her. This will not be lost on them at all, because if you got Magnuson, you just gutted Rhode Island. And she's not going to let that happen. And, you know, that's just sort of that's the way I read the tea leaves.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions of Mr. Mala? Seeing none, thanks. Is there anybody else from the general public that'd like to speak to resolution number 2021-13?
Anybody on Zoom can use the raise hand feature or unmute.
Okay, very good. We're bringing back to council, and thanks for the background information. They're very helpful, Mr. Mall. At this time, I'd like to pass the gavel to the Vice Mayor and ask to be recognized.
Yes, Sid, I have the virtual gavel, and you have the floor, Mayor Gabriel.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Malloy. So what this does is, this is consistent with our actions that we've taken on this issue recently. I think we're all pretty well aware of, the importance of allowing to not closing the EEZ, the importance of having that fishery to our coastal communities, on the peninsula, not just us, but Homer, Ninilchik, and, the economic activity that this provides is also speaks to our processors. We don't talk a lot about, the secondary and other, ancillary beneficiaries of the fishery in Cook Inlet. But in this case, we are down to very few processors that are in Cook Inlet, and they're a business like anybody else. They don't. It's not charity work for them. If they're not going to make any money, if they're not going to have a fishery, then they're going to leave. Once we lose those processors, it's going to be very problematic to bring them back. And along with that, manage the fishery in a cohesive way moving forward. Because if you don't have the processors, it's difficult to manage the fishery and using our commercial fishery as a tool to do that. I would mention, I might have mentioned it before when we passed the earlier resolution, that when this alternative 4 came into play, which was, as Mr. Ma pointed out, late in the game of a very long process. The court decision was made a while ago demanding that they take action, and then they had these 3 alternatives, and then late in the game, alternative 4 lands on the table. 223 public comments opposed to alternative 4 being chosen, and only 1 in favor, and it got chosen. So this is the sort of next step in the process to try to halt this and move towards a more agreeable settlement of this issue, to provide for management and opportunity for the drift fleet, and also provide that also extends that opportunity to our processors in Cook Inlet here. So, I will say that I have no objection to if the council wants to sign on to this. I think we've been pretty unanimous as a body as we've approached this subject. So, would not have any objection to the entire council signing the resolution if there's unanimous consent. And with that, I'll ask to have the gavel back.
Yes, and you have the gavel back, and if I might speak in support.
Yes, Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel, and I appreciate you bringing this resolution forward for us. Totally in an agreement with it, and like Councilmember Next did point out, that was really far out, alternative number 4. And we've always supported all of our commercial fisheries. They're very important to our community, including the drift net, and we don't want to see the drift net go down either. I was viewed some of the Borough Assembly meeting last night, and they passed a similar resolution, so that's a really good thing. So we're going towards speaking with the same voice, and the mayor called a special meeting for us in November to comment on it, and express our opposition to alternative 4 in November, and we were all happy to do that. And it's so we would have done the same thing, except we were able to do this in the course of regular business. But thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Councilmember Petty?
Yes, I will be in favor of this resolution, and alternative 4, it just absolutely, like it was stated in the public comments, that this just guts our fishery around here. It also has such a deep economic impact to our community, and I want to say thank you for your comments and giving us greater education. And I too would like to see that if this passes, that everyone has the privilege to put their name on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Petty. Councilmember Glendenning?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Yeah, I echo Councilor Petty's sentiments, and I'd be proud to sign my name to this.
Thank you. Any further discussion from council? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Malloy.
Yes.
Councilmember Petty.
Yes.
Councilmember Winger.
Yes.
Mayor Gabriel.
Yes.
Councilmember Askin.
Yes.
Councilmember Glendenning.
Yes.
Councilmember Naxtet.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Thank you, council. Next up, we're under new business, item G3, action approval, confirmation of Sarah Douthit nominated by the mayor to fill a vacancy on Beautification Committee. Oh, I guess before we get to that, I see one of our council members asking for a break. Let's take a 10-minute at ease, please.
Yeah.
call us back to order here. Next up, we have under new business, G4 vacant action approval, confirmation of Sarah Douthit nominated by the mayor to fill a vacancy on the Beautification Committee. Pleasure, Council. Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Move for council to confirm Sarah Douthit nominated by the mayor to fill the vacancy on the Beautification Committee.
I'll second that.
Any discussion on the action? Oh, Vice,
I just wanted to thank Kay Reed for her service and request unanimous consent.
okay. Very good. Unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? Seeing none, thank you. Ms. Douthit is appointed to the Beautification Committee, and I think that fills that committee, doesn't it? We got one more? Okay, I'll work on that one too. Next up, item G4, discussion, remote electronic participation in council meetings by council members and the public. Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Yeah, I asked to mention this at our last council meeting, and thought I'd put it on for a discussion item to see how council might want to move forward with how we conduct our public meetings and how council can participate in them remotely when business or medical reasons takes them out of town, and you know, whether we want to use new technology that we've been using in our hybrid meetings going forward to allow the public to participate that way also. There's kind of like three options. One is do nothing, and then we would revert back to the telephonic participation ordinance as is for council. And so that's in the packet for your information. Another option would be to amend that to allow remote electronic participation, using Zoom, so a council member would have the option of telephone or Zoom participation. And then a third option would be, to continue allowing the public also to participate, by Zoom in our meetings remotely. And so I asked the city clerk to put together her thoughts on that, including, kind of a fiscal note, sort of what costs would be, what we would have to look at, and I appreciate her doing that. And so then with the mayor's permission, I would turn it over to the discussion over first to the city clerk so she could, elaborate on some of the points in her memo. Thank you.
Ms. Hines.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Malloy and Mayor Gabriel. As I mentioned in the memo, we purchased Zoom due to the COVID public health emergency, and the features of Zoom that we currently have licenses for is a waiting room, audio conferencing so that commission members could call in toll free, and an annual, and then the host's license. And so the total cost for all of that is about $2,000. And so if we allowed the public to continue to participate in this hybrid way, that cost would be continual. If we decided that we could safely move back to in-person meetings, we could eliminate the audio conferencing piece, and that would save $1,200 annually. So then we're looking about $650. The audio conferencing provides that toll-free number, and it truly is at this point just used for the commissioners who didn't have the devices but needed to be able to connect virtually. And then if we were to allow the public to continue to attend virtually, I would recommend that we keep that waiting room license, and the cost for that is $500 annually. So it would be about $650 annually to keep the council and the public participating virtually. And if it's decided that we only want for city council to attend by Zoom and want the public to attend in person, it would be a $150 annual fee just for the user license, so that I could connect on the times when we had previous notification that the council member was going to attend by Zoom. As currently written in the code, there is no fee for the city council member to teleconference into a meeting. because the council member typically I call a local cell phone number that the council member is using. So those are the cost behind each of the different options. And then I also mentioned to Vice Mayor Malloy that when we're considering allowing the public to attend virtually, the links and phone numbers pursuant to Open Meetings Act have to be published on the agenda, which is posted on the website, and anybody has access to that information. And so during Soldotna's annexation hearing, the local boundary commission, a person who lived in Dillingham had commented against their proposed annexation. And so if it was an ongoing thing, it could be something that if Kenai gains a bunch of media attention, that somebody from far outside of the community could get wind of it and call in and comment on that. So I just wanted to make that clear that it's out there. I have to publish it on if we're gonna allow the public to do it, I have to publish it on the agenda, and anybody can contact it or can call in on it. And then allowing the virtual public participation, I don't think would require a code change. I think allowing council participation would require a code change. But if we did want for the public to be able to participate by Zoom, then I'd probably come back with a policy that goes along with the code change, so that we could enact with that maybe a sign-up sheet to help the mayor and I navigate who to call on at what point. I think I covered my memo. If you have any questions, I'm happy to talk about it.
Thank you. Comments, Councilmember Naxted.
For Jamie, kind of a question, if we went back to, just the phone, and then let's just go ahead and let council also zoom in, and it would be effectively about where we were before the whole COVID. But if we have the $150, which is kind of the basic plus there, I got that myself, but let's say Tim Dillon wanted to, would that be, using him as an example only, the EDD or somebody like that, would they be able to Zoom? How would you handle that as far as a council member or somebody like that, maybe a consultant with the city that would Zoom to give a report? I don't know if you thought about that through, or would we allow them to Zoom too with the $150
Ms. Hines?
option?
Thank you, Councilmember Naxted. With the $150, they would have to, I guess they could come in on the internet without having to pay a fee. If they were calling in, it's a toll number, and I would appreciate some sort of policy in place that speaks to who we would allow to Zoom in, even if it wasn't the public.
Councilmember Glendenning.
Yeah, just a question, if there was the concept of using FaceTime to communicate with us, could that be adapted to a screen or get the volume loud enough that we could hear and adequately communicate with the respondent?
Ms. Hines?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I don't know enough about FaceTime to comment on that.
Councilmember Winger.
I think it's great as we're moving into this face-to-face. I'd prefer to see people here. There's a lot to put a face to a name or to a voice. So I would prefer for the people to be in the audience. I prefer to be here myself. However, I do know that there are a lot of people in our community that still don't feel comfortable coming out into public places or crowded places. So if this ends up being packed, they wouldn't feel comfortable being in here. So I feel that this really gives people that comfort and still allows them to be active and participate and engage with us, where if they didn't have that, they just wouldn't show up and they wouldn't be engaging. I think this is something that we should look at continuing doing this hybrid through this year, as there are still a lot of unknowns We have a lot of people being vaccinated. However, there's still a lot of uncertainties, and even with vaccines, elders still don't feel safe and secure coming out. So I think it's something that maybe we could look at dropping these features in the future. But for the remaining of 2021, I think we're going to see a lot of uncertainties when it still comes to COVID, and offering this hybrid, I think would be a lot of benefit.
Councilmember Raskin.
Just as point of reference, before COVID-19, was it available for people to like Zoom in and observe the meeting as a mute?
Ms. Hines, I think I know the answer, but
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. No, people attended in person. The only time anybody attended any other way was council members by telephone, and we would call the telephone into the speaker system, and they could participate telephonically. I think we allowed it to happen for a planning and zoning commission member a couple of times as well, but the public was required to come here. And I just wanted to speak to Councilmember Winger's comment. I think that we would definitely use this hybrid system until people weren't using the Zoom hybrid situation frequently related to the public health emergency. I think that it would be after that, after the decision was made that it was safe to attend, for everybody to attend in person, whether we've reached herd immunity or whatever it is, that threshold. I think that the intent of this would be after that.
Councilmember Winger.
So if this emergency declaration goes away, we're not saying that this Zoom hybrid part goes away, because that was kind of my understanding and why we're talking about this, so that if this emergency declaration goes away, these are all things that we would have to ultimately look at.
And again, I think this is a policy decision, right? Because, we've got, part of the policy we have now is that you can only participate in so many, telephonically participate in so many meetings throughout the year. As part of the, pandemic, we sort of, changed that rule to say if people were uncomfortable, they could participate via Zoom, and it wouldn't be, we're sort of halting that, only getting so many meetings per year. I don't think, we as a council, as a body, can still continue that for ourselves. But certainly I think that this format we can continue on without, even if the emergency declaration goes away. Is it better policy? Councilmember Raskin.
I agree with Councilmember Winger. I'd like to see this continue through until the mandate or the emergency is declared over. But I really like the idea of having the Zoom available, but not interaction, just as an observation tool. We might get more participation in seeing what our meetings are about.
Yeah, and to answer your question before, even though people, Ms. Hines was correct in fact that other people couldn't call in, but they could still go online and watch us deliberate, but they just couldn't call in as well. So that was still available. Vice Mayor Malloy.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate your comment on that, because I will comment on it also. It was back in 2006 when we first got the webcam, and so that allowed people to watch the council in real time, and then also on demand. That there was people enjoyed doing that, and I've heard comment about over time about that you don't have to ask people what they said, because you can go see what they actually said by viewing that. So what I thought, and I certainly can be corrected if it's incorrect, is that when our emergency declaration goes away, we're, as far as our own participation is, we're back to our telephonic participation ordinance, which and I agree with my colleagues. I've always preferred being here in person, and I love to see people here testifying to us in person. That's really important. So this isn't to say that that would go away. I've always found it to be less, less effective when you have to call into a meeting when you're not there personally, especially if you have something on the agenda. It's really difficult to do that remotely. But there has been times we've had, maybe less than 5 over the years, times when there's actually been 3 council members that have been on the phone, because of business or whatever, and we always need to have at least 4 here, but it does happen that people travel. And I think I think it's great for Mr. Dillon to have the option. He might not have been in town today. Maybe that's why he did it remotely. I don't know, but he's been here in person before. It's good to hear what everyone has to say. I was just looking proactively, towards what's going to happen when we move away from our emergency declaration, which maybe will be, by the summer or whatever. And I heard what Councilmember Winger said, at the last meeting. I always encourage more public participation. So, I would certainly be in favor of the whole 9 yards, but, you know me. So anyway, thanks.
Councilmember Denning.
Yeah, I appreciate Councilor Malloy's approach. What I see is we have 2 tracks of consideration. Is one for the public and one for our commissions and committees and how we manage our business. I'm all for providing a means for maybe the public to be able to more effectively engage with us, but it is imperative that our commissions and committees meet here in person. We have the ability to provide for them. We have the social distancing. We have this. We have the masks, and I have seen the how can we say, the effectiveness of the commission and committee meeting terribly degraded by the remote participation. I would say that, especially in the case of planning and zoning, that their attendance requirements mirror the same as ours. Councils and planning and zoning are mandated by Title 24. They have primacy, they have importance. Us, planning and zoning, and us should meet in person, and the old rules apply. If someone wants to Zoom in or call in, we can adopt that amongst ourselves and set up a policy as Mr. Malloy, Councilor Malloy suggests. But I very firmly assert that our commissions and committees need to meet in person here so we can have more effective public comment, more effective interaction amongst ourselves. I've seen people come in here to an empty chamber, one here, me sitting here and someone over there, pouring their heart out, and the people up there couldn't hear, couldn't understand, or their response or their questions were vague and incoherent. And so especially with planning and zoning and us, and I'm beating a horse here, but we have to meet in person, and the sooner the better.
Yeah, just on that note, I mean, we're all here because we choose to be here, and I've struggled with this because, if there was a member that did not feel comfortable being here, we would have accommodated them on Zoom, up to that point. I think the question on all of our minds is, where's that point where you say, okay, as Councilmember Winger pointed out, more people are getting vaccinated, herd immunity, but we don't actually have that date yet of where we can be. We can certainly send a letter out or a correspondence requesting that, that they do meet in person. I don't know at this point if we could demand it simply because of the fact that if someone feels they have underlying health conditions and they wouldn't feel safe being here. That might be a legal question or a question for Scott if we actually demanded that they be in person at this time.
I'd start demanding.
I get it.
We need people here in person to take care of the people's business, especially with planning and zoning and with the council. And we have the distancing, we have the mask, we have the protocols. They can show up here in a safer condition than, say, even at our chamber luncheon today, or as they go to the post office, or as they go to Walmart, or any other place. I don't think we should be the outlier. I think, personally, from my point of view, it's not a good use of my time to come here to an empty room and listen to how can we say, wayward technology try and communicate with us. It's not effective, and we should set a path for attendance for our commissions and committees. Thank you.
Councilmember Weyer?
I would just like to add to that a little. I have seen that on the Parks and Recs Committee as well, in-person attendance from people that had been showing up. It is a lot easier for them to just, with families, be on there via Zoom. But it is hard to know attendance of, oh, are they coming through the door? Are they going to be online? Kind of waiting. But there are people that serve on that committee too that have extreme concern on health conditions, that don't feel comfortable or safe and have totally changed their way of doing things in life, and that this is a big benefit to them being able to do that. However, I do feel that we should be there. We have seen a lack of attendance through this. As Jim has said, it is important for people to come in and speak and actually speak to somebody and not look up here at this screen. But it is, again, like I said, a double-edged sword, because there are people that serve on these committees and commissions that do have legitimate concern to not come in, but there are able bodies that are choosing not to come in as well.
That's what I'm struggling with. I guess I would ask Mr. Well, go ahead, Councilmember.
Go ahead.
I guess I'd ask Mr. Bloom if he could maybe give a little research on this and maybe have a discussion item on the next meeting regarding our legal opinion as far as what we could do to require in-person attendance for committee commission members with and without the emergency. I don't know if the emergency declaration would play into it, but certainly if it does, let us know, okay? Councilmember Next.
I agree with almost everything I've heard. I can't really pin down what I don't, but on Mr. Glendenning's point here, well taken. I absolutely agree. And I think we're going to have a hard time demanding anybody come in under the circumstances right now. However, each time a notice goes out for a meeting, they could be encouraged to come in, and perhaps it's not unheard of, and not if somebody is going to be Zooming in that is local or in town, perhaps they could sign a statement that, I'm on this commission and I don't feel comfortable. They don't have to say why or whatever, but it makes them kind of do the next step, because I think my opinion on whatever it is 85% or more are probably, it's just convenient. And that's just what I think. And basically it makes them actually do something. And I appreciate what they do, and I want them to do it here. But getting back to what I thought was the main point really was, it had to do with Zoom and our meetings, as we move forward and everything. And I concur that we stay on the ship we're at under the circumstance. And when those lines go away and those markers, those papers on the chairs go away, and people can come in here, I think that's the time for the public to come and speak to us. We really haven't had too much as far as public testimony through the Zoom. We've had a little, but we've had some. And but I think that it's a whole lot more effective here, and people can use those cameras. They can watch us. I've done that before in the past myself, so I concur with that. And it would be a good tool, for council if you're on vacation, because we're gone sometime, to be able to Zoom in. You can't, as it is right now, you can't see from there in here, but you can see there. And we've had, like the mayor said, up to 3 council members, it just kind of aligned. So they're on the phone, but you can't see them, and trying to run a meeting with people you can't see, but if they're up there, it helps you, they might be able to wave or whatever, you know, it be recognized. Trying to make a motion or be part of the meeting is, it's so much more difficult on a phone. If you're there, at least half the communication is being done. So my long way around here, I guess, is I'm kind of more in for the $150 deal, rather, so I can have the option to Zoom in, or I can phone in as a council member. And I think there should be some possibilities for others, and I used Tim Dillon as an example earlier, you know, somebody that is, if not working for the council, for the city or something along that lines, where they could have that code. And it's not an additional cost, I think, if you're on Zoom, you know, people Zoom in, where they can Zoom in and provide a report to the council like that. So perhaps there's a code issue there. Jamie will need some kind of direction on what that is, but that would be the direction I would go down the road, but decision doesn't have to be made now.
Councilmember Askin.
I agree. I think that the Zoom has just gotten better and better. I think as everybody's more comfortable with it, I think it's been working better. I do agree with Mr. Glendenning, especially planning and zoning. They're also a paid commission, and I'm wondering if there isn't, you know, if there's some request that, or expectation, I guess, that we would that they be here in person to address the public's concerns.
Yeah, and I get that frustration. I mean, I'm like Vice Mayor Malloy said, I'm the same way. I would rather be here in person. When we were Zooming, all on Zoom, it was you know, our city clerk did a great job of getting us connected and everything, but it was just that not having that face to face, so it was just very frustrating. I get it, but I hear what everybody's saying. I'd like to hear the input from our city attorney. Yeah, well, just a minute, Jim. So as we move forward, if we can get, if that's a discussion item on the next meeting, I'd certainly like to have input from our legal department. Mr. Glendenning.
Yeah, just try and put a loop around our discussion. Dr. Zink and others had an informational meeting with us, and she averred aloud that around the end of this month, there should be some type of balance where a good portion of our citizens are vaccinated, and the question of herd immunity was raised, and she thought it would start to take effect about that time. And then the question was, well, when it would not be absolute, but be as effective as it was going to be, a combination of the herd immunity and the vaccines. And she said it'd be around the 1st of July, about the time for our parade. So that might be a good benchmark to look at for what we're trying to discuss here. But again, just going back to what Commissioner Askin said, is that the planning and zoning is a commitment and an obligation and a duty to the citizens, that they are mandated under Title 29 to be quasi-judicial. They can't go in there or wherever they go to have adjudication on Zoom. It has to be here. So I would lay that gauntlet down. I'll perhaps temper my comments until we can get some feedback from say someone like Dr. Zink saying when we have herd immunity, when her benchmarks have been achieved. But the time is coming soon. Thank you.
I agree. Councilmember Petty.
Yes, I appreciate the opportunity for the discussion. I too, my preference is to be here publicly, face to face, and if my public, not my public, but if the public wants to come in after the emergency, we should wean that off, and they can still participate. I mean, they can still be involved by watching if they don't have anything to comment from afar. But I would like to see us wean ourselves off of this emergency opportunities as things get back to normal, and let us take the lead getting back to normal. Life has risk, and we can't remove all risk. And I know that there was regrets that the 4th of July parade did not occur last year because of the possibilities of risk. So I'm just, as soon as possible, when things settle down, resume our opportunities like they previously were, and provide Zoom for the city council members, and utilize the current telephonic participation to give us those guidelines. And that ends my comments.
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, the sooner we get back to quote unquote normal, the better. I'm all for that. I guess I have a question. So regarding action from, whether it's a policy change from council, if the emergency order comes off, is there anything that we need to do to continue status quo, Ms. Hines, as far as a policy change? Or Mr. Bloom, I guess?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I would defer to the attorney, but it might be that you need to enact another temporary ordinance waiving code if we don't, if Vice Mayor Willey doesn't bring something sooner before it's.
Okay, so if we keep the emergency declaration in place, no change. But if we pull the emergency declaration, then we would have to would take action from us to continue status quo. That's, I guess, my question. Okay, very good. Vice
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I want to thank all my colleagues. I really appreciate the discussion. I think what I would do is just work with the clerk to bring back a very narrow ordinance, just electronic monitoring for council to do Zoom to modify our telephonic ordinance. And also, I'm going to be asking for a better camera. And I want, if a council member is going to participate by Zoom when they have to be out of town, that they're able to see in. And so it would be limited to that. Everything else is, according to the clerk, as far as, we have a policy on commissions, that, and then or for the public, that's, down the road, and there'll be a lot of discussion about that, but I think I would put something on the table. And because I have white hair, I have to tell one story, if you'll bear with me for a minute. This is a telephonic participation story. This is before we went to cell phones, okay? And the reason we went to cell phones was because Councilmember Eldridge, when he got sworn in, was in South America. And at that time, the policy, the ordinances changed a lot over time. But at that time, you paid for it, okay? And former council member Boyle was someplace else, and the bill was over $300. And so Boyle and Eldridge had to negotiate over, how to divvy that up and everything, because the city wasn't paying it. But when you use cell phones, like the clerk said, there is no cost. So I think that if we did, like Councilmember Naxted said, the $150, that's just the cost of doing business. I mean, I have that for my business because, we have to have meetings that are over an hour, and when I call my daughter in the United Kingdom, I can't shut up, so it takes sometimes longer than an hour to do that, and a better camera, and then, everything else we can, develop as we go along. So thank you for the discussion. That would be my intent, and then it would be to bring something forward so there's something in place for us. Thank you.
So, Councilmember Glendinning.
Yeah, just one more thing. For emergency declaration, we can take our comments and our considerations, and maybe as we're going, we're learning. And maybe if you're going to ask for another one, just temper and modify and narrow. What are your asks? You have powers to declare anything for a finite amount of time, and if there's an oh my God, we can meet and support you. So we'll just ask you, what is the current reality now as far as health demands, COVID risk exposure, and how we go through, the disaster declaration that we've had. I think we're at a point now where we're looking to trim down, and I look forward to your leadership in this. Thank you.
Thank you. So nod of heads with Council Malloy, Vice Mayor Malloy's proposed. Okay, very good. With that, we'll move on to item G5, discussion water and sewer service penalty, interest, and shutoffs for non-payment beyond the COVID-19 disaster emergency declaration. I believe there's a memo from administration included under this topic of some of the options here. So this deferral would go away if the declaration comes off. So I think what you're looking for is a path forward regarding how we respond to that, either under these scenarios, which is do nothing, enact a grace period, or forgive the debt. Is that what I'm? Okay. Councilman Winger.
Yes, I have, I guess, a question for our attorney. I would be in favor of option 2, but is there a way that we can do a confession of judgment for that? So I don't see anywhere stating that you have to be in good faith on that payment plan with us. So ultimately, you have a 2-year period to pay that. So if they chose not to pay for 2 years, then technically we would be 3 years delinquent for that. So are we able to get like a confession of judgment, or are we able to work on this where if they're not making those good faith payments, they're booted from this payment plan, and then they would be responsible for the interest and penalties? It's just by the wording, I'm a little concerned that they could ride out and not pay for an additional 2 years of payment plans and then be 3 years behind.
Mr. Bloom.
Thank you. So if I was king for the day, which I'm not, that's exactly what my recommendation would be, that we extend 2-year payment plans to everybody that is currently on this list, that we suspend all penalty and interest as long as they're current on the payment plan, and that we get a confession of judgment that we don't file, we just hold in our office in case they no longer pay. And as well as a confession of judgment, I would also suggest imposing penalties and fees if they can't remain current. And I want to preface that by saying both the finance department and the legal department, if somebody misses a payment, we don't just all of a sudden file the confession of judgment and impose fees and penalties. You know, we give people a call and we say, hey, let's work together to try and keep this thing going, because a lot of times, especially in this condition, you're dealing with people that have been affected by COVID. They don't have money, so even if you file a confession of judgment, that doesn't necessarily get you money. That just gets you a judgment in court. So we found that working with people and being lenient is the best way forward, but that would be my recommendation.
Any further discussion? Councilmember Naxton?
I think Council Member Winger had a good point, and it sounds like that was your intent under option number 2, to put that kind of language into the ordinance. Is that correct, even though it's not explicitly there?
Mr. Bloom?
Thank you. Well, if we were to, so if the emergency declaration expires, Terry and I are bound to follow code. So when it expires, we would have people that are very delinquent. It would trigger a shut-off or, notice, and then potentially shut off. So what I'm looking for, what we would need to do in an ordinance is suspend that. We will work with people on a payment plan, but what would be unique about this payment plan that we wouldn't do under a typical payment plan is not impose both penalty and interest as long as payments were being made. A, they kept current, and B, they were able to stay current with the payment plan. So those would be the two, that would essentially be what, there'd be a grace period, give us some time before we shut people off to get everybody on payment plans. Unfortunately, that is a lot of work for my office, but certainly something that we can handle to set up all these payment plans and confession of judgments. So we need some time to get that set up where we're still not shutting things off, and then sort of, I guess, an acknowledgement that these people haven't paid for so long. I mean, this started with the state, said, hey, utilities can't shut anybody off. That expired a while ago. We continued it. So in recognition of that, as long as they're making payments, that we wouldn't impose penalty or interest on them for their delinquent amounts.
Councilman Winger?
I guess I have a little question on the payments. Would somebody be able to make a payment arrangement for $5 a month? Would they be required to pay the $50 a month? Would they also be required to be current on the current bills? So be in a payment plan for those back bills, but would also have to remain current on their current bills.
So they would generally have to remain current on their current bills, and it doesn't really matter how much they pay every month or biweekly, whatever, as long as the payment plan is completed within 2 years is generally our rule. I mean, council could extend that, but when you start getting past 2 years, I think it adds complications to things. Another thing that's an option that we don't have to make people do, but it's certainly an option, is to assign the city their PFD or a portion of their PFD. So people could have small payments on a monthly basis, then a balloon payment when a PFD comes, and then another balloon payment. So payments could be relatively small. I mean, one thing is we certainly don't want to force people into situations where they're going to fail.
Councilman Winger?
I just want to follow up on that. So my understanding with talking with the borough on this is they don't take $5 payments. They if they were to look at the payment overall and take $5 payments, it could take somebody 20 years to pay off that debt. So I guess having what the baseline would be to make sure these accounts were paid in that 2-year plan. I don't want to set the bar low and say, oh, okay, you can only afford $5 or $10, but 2 years down the line, it's not going to be close to paying off that threshold. I think it's great to attach to the PFD. However, with the current state of PFDs, we don't really know what the given amount of that's going to be. We don't know what the future of a PFD is going to be. We don't know if those PFDs are going to be garnished on other ends of things. So there's a lot of uncertainties when we start looking at attaching to PFDs. People get child support taken out because they fell for taking that, other court fines and fees. So if we set a payment plan with saying we'll assign the PFD in the future date, we don't know what else they've attached to that PFD and if there would be enough of that to go around to offset the expense. So I think that's a great additional thing. However, it's not one I would want to bank payments around a balloon payment with a PFD just because we don't know what other promises, garnishments, or anything on that would be. And I would just like to see payment plans reflect the amount to the account so that in that 2-year mark it could be paid off, not where it's $5 payments and in 2 years we still have it balanced.
And we also have the ability to lien the property. Is that correct, Mr. Lowe?
Yeah, we can certainly lien a property. I wouldn't do that again unless a payment plan is missed. Basically, if they fall off the payment plan, all of our usual remedies, liens, judgments, we already have the signed confession of judgment, are there. We certainly don't bank on the PFD. I will tell you we have the ability to look and see generally a history if people are getting garnished and that sort of thing. But they can still assign their PFD to us, and if the PFD doesn't follow through, then they have to come up with that balloon payment some other way.
Councilmember Nexted.
Yeah, just to follow up on the lien idea, I mean, the cost of the bill for utilities goes with the land and not the individual. So somebody owns the money and they sell the property, they're gone. The property still owns it, so now it's the new owner. So I guess if you're going to have an ordinance, I think that it would probably want to include something in there that if they're not keeping up with their payments or what they're supposed to do, that you would lien it, but in that case, but then I guess they could just sell the property and perhaps the new buyer may not know about it too. So I'd hate to have the problem become multiplied in some way, and perhaps the amounts are enough where that could be a big issue for somebody.
Thank you. So I guess I'd just say, we do these payment plans all the time with people. I'm not looking for, I mean, you're welcome to tell me how to do a payment plan, but we do them successfully all the time, and we file liens outside of COVID. I think, as you know, Councilmember Next said, we're working on a policy right now. What I'm just looking for is, I guess, if council wants to create some sort of grace period and what the limitations on that would be. If we're gonna go outside of code, we would need some time to give people to get onto payment plans before we shut their water off. And if council wanted to be more lenient than our internal procedures with the limitation on 2 years. I mean, maybe I should have given you an example of what our form payment plan has in it, because it has everything you guys are discussing.
I guess it's easy for us to get into the weeds, so that's probably what I'm doing here.
Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Yeah, I also support option number 2. And you kind of took some of the words away from me. Mr. Bloom, I would see the ordinance as setting the parameters. And I wouldn't want to get too far into the weeds because it gets into your flexibility of dealing with the individuals on it. Thank you.
Councilmember Glendenning.
Yeah, I'll be supporting option number 2 with keeping in mind the discussions that I've heard, and look forward to seeing it. Thank you.
Okay, I think I'm for option 2 also, and I'm seeing a nodding of heads, pretty much unanimous around the table here. But I would like to ask, there's programs for housing and rental assistance. Is there any COVID relief money from the federal government? There might be some in this next package that would apply to utility relief, where we can connect those people if they need to apply for, utility payments. It doesn't make sense to me that we're covering people's mortgage or rent, but not utilities. So I'm just curious, and I'm not aware of any, but I just wonder if there is. Mr. Bloom.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. So unfortunately, there is specific CARES Act guidance, at least with the first round, that prohibited us replacing water and sewer funds. So essentially, we could give people money, but we couldn't assure that that money gets put in our account. So we can't, we could say, here's money for utilities, but we can't require them to give it back to us for the utilities, if you understand what I mean.
Okay, yeah.
Because that was considered revenue replacement.
Well, yeah, in this, there's, another round of COVID relief. I think that's probably working its way through the Senate right now. And I don't know what the final version of that is, but I'm sure there's other municipalities that are facing the same situation that we are. So clearly, if there's something available there that we can connect, that happens to come out of there, that connect those folks, then, we'll definitely be on it.
And I'll just throw one other wrinkle so council understands, and this wasn't in my memo. What I described in the memo is there's 29 accounts that completed the paperwork. There's also accounts that we're not turning off because of the public health emergency that haven't done the paperwork. And so we would treat those differently, just so council's aware. If they didn't do the paperwork, if they didn't take advantage of the program we offered, but they're not communicating with us, we would go ahead and follow our normal shut-off and collection procedures for those accounts, unless council directed us to do differently.
Councilman Ware.
I have a question for Scott. If they don't take advantage and those other accounts haven't signed up, is that something that they would be able to sign up later on?
Mr. Bloom or Scott?
Thank you. Well, they could still sign up, I believe, as long as we have our emergency declaration in place. But once the emergency declaration's gone, the whole thing would be gone. And I did misspeak, I think, about non-participating accounts, Terry will fill in the details.
Mr. Eubank?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So just to clarify a couple things. So our current procedure right now is that around the 8th, 10th of the month, when an account is 2 months delinquent, that means they have 2 months unpaid and there's a current bill out. So in all reality, by the 20th of whatever month that is, they have three months worth of utility payments due. We hang a shut-off tag, and it's a notice of delinquency. And attached to that tag, our current policy, and we've been doing this for months, is we hang the required information that they need to submit to get into our COVID program. If they fail to do that, we currently are shutting folks off. We're currently following when the governor's mandate, the legislation passed. It wasn't the governor, actually, it was the legislature passed it. When that expired, we have been shutting folks off who failed to do that paperwork. Okay, once they file that paperwork with us, we're no longer hanging those shut-off tags. We are continuing to bill them, and we encourage them at the time they signed up to try to make some amount of payments, because, you know, this day was coming. We're trying to keep people from getting a year behind and having this massive hole to dig out of. The other thing I'd say, like Scott said, you know, without digging into the weeds, when we establish a payment plan, there are very specific parameters. It's not, well, pay us what you can each month. It's, you know, the first thing we ask folks, though, honestly, is what can you afford to pay? Because the last thing I want to do is enter a payment plan with somebody, you know, when they're under duress. We're driving the boat here. We can shut their water off, and we establish a payment plan that they can't afford. That makes no sense. That's not what we're trying to accomplish. So we do set up, you know, what they can, but within a 2-year period. That's kind of been our benchmark. We've never gone beyond that. That's the maximum length. But if they can pay it off sooner, we'll absolutely enter a payment agreement that lets them pay it off sooner as well. But we haven't allowed people just to randomly come in and make payments and consider them to be compliant. There's very, very specific parameters, but we get their input to set those parameters in the goal of making everybody in this successful. We don't want to shut people's water off. We want them to be able to pay their bill and be successful with the city. So,
Thank you, Councilmember Winger.
I see a lot of numbers here, but what I don't see is what the monthly cost of these services are. Can we get that, just for record, I guess?
Well, I know there's different for commercial and residential, but anybody, Mr. Eubank, want to take a stab at that?
yeah, don't quote me on the exact down to the dollar, but it's between $95 and $100 for a residential and a monthly water bill. I'd have to look at the schedule. I apologize. Huh? Water and sewer, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So I think we're all agreement with option 2 moving forward. Okay. Moving on, we'll go to item G6, discussion COVID-19 response.
Oh, wait, I did die.
Mr. O'Shea.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. COVID report for tonight. We have 1 employee who is in our COVID protocol right now. 2 patients that are currently hospitalized at CPH due to COVID. That's ranged from 0 to 2 over the last 2 weeks. The Kenai Fire Department is holding a vaccination clinic at the Beacon Building on March 13th. We received a vaccine allotment for March of 300 vaccines. We are also looking to collaborate and partner with seafood processors in town to provide vaccinations for those seafood processors as their employees come into town. We contacted 1 seafood processor that actually has employees coming in April, and we're looking to coordinate to provide the vaccines for them when they arrive. This processor is actually going to put them into a 2-week quarantine, but by the time they're done with the quarantine, we're hoping that the vaccine that we're going to be able to provide is the Johnson & Johnson, which 2 weeks after they reach maximum efficacy. So we are looking to collaborate with those folks to help them out. The Senior Center, as of March 1st, we began opening up the center to some activities. You'll see them continuing to add activities as we talked earlier tonight. One component of that is transportation. We're going to start providing transportation. And as Councilmember Winger said, one of the limitations that we have right now is drivers. We are in the process of hiring 2 drivers. Once they're fully trained, that will help us to provide those transportation services. So we are going to continue to add, and again, we're always keeping our eyes on the COVID numbers. If they continue to trend as they have for a while, we'll continue to slowly open up the Senior Center until we're back to fully functioning. One other facility, the Rec Center, is beginning to offer new programs. They're starting to open up a little bit as well. They were unable to have the Adult Basketball League this winter, but they are going to have a March Madness program so that those folks that normally would participate in that Adult League are going to have an opportunity to get some games in for that. So they're slowly beginning to look to add additional programs as well. And that is all I have for my COVID report, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions of administration? Councilmember Glendenning.
Yeah, thank you, through the mayor. On our rec center over here, is there in the offing a change of approach as to how it's going to be managed and the offerings that are there, or are we just going to try and do business as usual and maybe revert back to a place and time that was 20 years ago or more? What's our view of the usage and how we're going to manage the rec center?
Mr. Ostrander.
Through the mayor, Councilmember Glendenning, are you referring to the proposal for when the city takes over management of the facility, or between now and then?
If you could go between now and then and then lead us to the obvious that's going to happen.
Okay. Through the mayor, Councilmember Glendenning. So I have been in communications with the Boys and Girls Club and talked to them about continuing to expand their services, and hopefully before the end of the fiscal year they'll be back to relatively normal operations. I certainly think that is their objective. I did send the memo to council this last week about the proposal that you'll be seeing in the budget, the FY22 budget, where city employees would take over management of that facility at the beginning of the fiscal year. We anticipate, at least initially, providing the same level of service that the Boys and Girls Club has provided over the last many years. However, in talking to Mr. Frates, there's a lot of programs he'd like to see added to the facility, additional programs that he'd like to see done. So certainly one of the things that we would have is additional control over those programs that we didn't have when we had the Boys and Girls Club in there as a concessionaire. So I do think that it allows us the opportunity to add programs that you likely haven't seen for a while in that facility that we would be pursuing. But initially, it would probably be more of a status quo until we got settled in under the new management style, and then we would look to add additional programs as we went forward.
Okay, that's a heartening approach, and perhaps with Mr. Frady's guidance, we'll be able to parrot or replicate the success we've had at the hockey arena. And I look forward to that opportunity. Thank you.
Councilmember Winger.
I would just like to add on to the rec center as well. We are a wrestling family. We've been displaced this year. Kenai Caveman Wrestling Team that's been around for almost 40 years has no home. They're looking at folding, so our entire team has either not been able to wrestle this year or we've had to adjust and join the other leagues. I do know that there's great interest from the Kenai team on renting the rec center from December through the end of May, so about a 6-month time period that they would like to call that home. They would need to store their mats and be able to access and have 4-hour practices 2 to 3 times a week. Currently, we wrestle 2 times a week in Nikiski, and that cost us in rentals about $2,200 a month that we're paying the Nikiski Rec Center. But we would like to bring our business into Kenai. We need a home, so it's something when we're talking about expanding services, there is a want for space and a space for home and money, but nobody has offered a home to many of the wrestling communities, teams that have been displaced. So I just want to throw that out there that we would like to come in and rent that space. It hasn't been very easy to do that with the Boys and Girls Club, but if the city takes over management, we would like to have a home in Kenai that we could rent.
Any other questions on the city manager on COVID-19 response? Councilmember Glendinning?
Yeah, just to follow up on my other comment, you know, with regarding the disaster resolution, it looks like we're anticipating a adjustment, a modification of it, and we're starting to pare down having an absolute declaration and trying to address in code or policy some of the things, the concerns that have been revealed in the disaster declaration. And so I know that you've taken all our comments into account, and maybe we can tailor a disaster resolution that would be you know, a little more limited, and perhaps be able to forecast a time to the future when we will be back to normalcy, perhaps even the benchmark that Dr. Zink suggested. But you're in better stead to forecast that than I. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions of the city manager regarding COVID-19? Seeing none, we'll move to commission committee reports. Council on Aging.
Thank you, Mayor. There is no report for today. However, our next meeting will be at 4:30 on March the 11th, and that will be at the Senior Center with social distancing in place. And so I look forward to being there personally. Thank you.
Thank you. Airport Commission?
Thank you. Next Airport Commission meeting is March 11th, right here, 6 o'clock.
Thank you. Harbor Commission?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Next meeting is Monday, March 8th.
Parks and Recreation Commission?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. We will be meeting tomorrow night here in the chambers at 6 o'clock.
Thank you. Planning and Zoning Commission?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I don't have a calendar. Maybe the clerk could help me to announce. There was not a meeting. The last meeting was suspended because of agenda items. But we're looking here, let's see, planning and zoning, be the 10th, right? Is what I'm looking at, the 10th for our next meeting? Thank you.
Thank you. Beautification Committee?
I have no report. Next meeting will be April 13th.
Very good. And one more spot we'll try to fill there to fill that committee. Mini Grant Steering Committee, I have no report. Under report of the mayor, first of all, I'd like to thank council for their support on resolution number 2021-13. And then city manager Ostrander and I presented over at the chamber today, did our third annual State of the City presentation, which, you know, in all honesty, looking at, you know, we just given one last year, just, I mean, literally a week before, you know, everything kind of got weird with COVID nationally and in state. So looking back, I mean, projecting out, I don't think at that time, you know, that it would be that, you know, positive of a presentation, but it actually was. What Kenai came through this year very well. Hopefully, you know, moving forward, we sort of maintain that. There'll have a lot of positive things going on. And I think it was pretty well received. I'd like to thank Christine Cunningham for her work on that, getting us, at least me anyway, and kind of the village idiot, somewhat refined for that. So appreciate that. And then one other thing I wanted to just mention to everybody is we got employee evaluations coming up. I'll ask Stormy to send out the forms for those evaluations, and for Victoria, and Ms. Winger will have her send a little description of you know, the sort of format of how we do those forms. And essentially it's everybody completes the assessment of each of our employees, the city manager, city clerk, and city attorney. And then we bring those, you know, in, and we actually do sit downs and go over those, and then go over them with the employees. So, and I'll ask Ms. Hines to put a discussion item on our next meeting to set a date for when we'll actually perform those evaluations. We usually do them in April, somewhere around the middle of April. So just to give you a heads up on that coming down the pike. So other than that, I don't really have anything to report. And with that, we'll move to administration reports and go to city manager, Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I wanted to start out at the last meeting. Councilmember Nackstead asked me to report to council on the idea that there were non-Kenai businesses that had qualified and were paid out under the Kenai grant. Councilmember Winger did reach out to me and provided me with the name of the business that had reportedly received Kenai funds. We confirmed that they did not. We actually went further and contacted the Kenai Peninsula Borough to determine if possibly that was what they had meant by saying that they had received a Kenai grant. They didn't receive a Kenai Peninsula Borough grant either, so we did close the loop on that. The one business that was reported did not receive Kenai funding. So good to know that we didn't provide funding to a non-Kenai business in our grant program. So moving on, Terry and I have made it through the majority of the department budget meetings. It was basically budget meetings all day, every day for 3 days last week, but we made it through all of them. And we spent a considerable amount of time with each department talking about their narratives and also their fiscal year goals. And we wanted to make sure that this year, council will likely recall that 3 years ago was the first time that we actually provided those narratives and those goals in the budget document. And we wanted this budget document to be more refined and make sure that those goals were meaningful for the department. And not only that, but that they were very measurable so that when council sees them again during the preparation of the FY23 budget, that you can see very clearly whether or not they accomplished the goals that they set during this budget process. So hopefully when you see the budget document, you'll notice that those narratives have been refined, that the goals that the departments have put forth, and as you know, you get to talk to every department head at that time, they can talk about them, and they are more refined, and I think will make it a much more valuable document than what we've seen in the past. We've got a really active recruiting period over the next month. There's 4 positions that I wanted to bring council up to speed on and make sure that you knew that we were going to be recruiting. There's 3 positions in Public Works. All 3 of them are in the administrative part of Public Works. So it's a significant shift, significant change for Public Works. The admin assistant, procurement specialist, which council passed an ordinance 2 meetings ago approving that position. That is going to be posted on March 10th. We plan on interviewing the very first week of April. Our building official, Mike Wesson, put in his letter of resignation several weeks ago, and he's going to be leaving in the middle of this month, so we'll be posting for his position as well on March 10th. And then beyond that, I've talked to council several times about the need in that department to bring on a capital projects manager because we're just not getting through the capital projects that council is appropriating in appropriate time period. So we will be posting that position as well on March 10th. However, that one requires council approval before we can hire the position. Because I think we need to get that position on quickly, we're going to post on March 10th. There will be an introduction of an ordinance on March 17th to council with hopefully your approval at the first meeting of April, and then a hiring of that individual shortly thereafter. Again, that's a position that we've identified is of great need to the city. The interesting thing about that position is it doesn't have an impact to the general fund because essentially 100% of their time will be paid out of project funds. So you won't see a commensurate impact to the general fund, even though we are bringing on an additional position to the city. And the last position that we're posting, and that one actually posted yesterday, is it's a sad day actually, but we're posting for the airport manager to find someone to fill the shoes, try to fill the shoes of Mary Bondurant. needed to talk about a city employee who's gone above and beyond or who deserves recognition. The employee I'm going to tell you about tonight is Tony Pryor. He has done an amazing job. You know, he does an amazing job day to day, every day as a fire chief. I really enjoy working with Tony. But when it comes to vaccination, he has really become our vaccination expert. He's gone above and beyond to get approval as a vaccine provider. It was not an easy process to go through, but he did it. He's there at every one of our vaccination clinics on the weekends. Him and, you know, really all the employees of the fire department represent the city incredibly well. Their clinics are organized, they're friendly, they're professional. So Tony's done a great job for the city getting those going, and really appreciate the work that he's done. And then finally, the Bluff project, our RFP for the design of that project opens tomorrow. We've already received 3 or 4 proposals. We hope to get more. Hopefully we have really quality proposals and we're able to award a contract in the next several weeks. And if we are, council will be seeing that in the form of a resolution. And that's all I've got, but I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Mr. Oster. Any questions of the city manager? Vice Mayor Malloy?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. A couple of comments first, then a question. Totally agree with you about Tony Pryor. Been to several of his clinics, both as a subject and also support subject, and all the EMS and other volunteers. I mentioned Cindy Hare, you know, works for Scott, has been a volunteer there. They've been doing a great job. Budget related, you probably heard I'm going to ask for that $500 or whatever to be in the budget for legislative for a webcam. You know, that would be better for Zoom. Then just unrelated subject, I received a couple of complaints about lack of snow clearing on sidewalks, you know, the past week for Forest Drive, and then coming out of you know, along Spur Highway. A lot of people are, you know, foot traffic, you know, trying to use them and everything. And I know the Spur Highway is not, is state, you know, and everything, but perhaps you could comment on that and what we're trying to do as far as Forest Drive and areas like that are concerned. So, you know, when people ask me about it, I have something more to tell them.
Mr. Oster?
Yeah, through the mayor, Vice Mayor Malloy. Yeah, so sidewalks are something that we do get to. You know, this last storm system was unique in that we got 2 that were separated kind of on either side of the weekend. And we're always trying to manage our crews to limit overtime and certainly limit double overtime on the weekends. So we did manage the crew, so it took us a little bit longer to get the streets cleared after that Monday storm. But typically what we do is we try to get all of the streets, we try to touch all those streets within 24 hours of that storm. The second day is more about cleanup, trying to make sure that any berms that are in the driveway are cleared and really get the streets and driveways cleared well. The third day is typically when we start taking care of the sidewalks. So I did check with Scott Curtin, Public Works Director, today, and they were out actively clearing sidewalks today. Hopefully when you go home from the meeting tonight, Forest Drive will be taken care of and the sidewalks will be done. So we do start working on those starting on day 3 after we get the roads passable. And we slowly kind of work from the some of those larger streets, then we work our way into the smaller streets in town.
And just a follow-up, if I may. You know, and I may be incorrect, but I think on occasion the city's also helped out the state on the Spur Highway sidewalks, or is that not correct?
Yes, through the mayor, Vice Mayor Malloy, we do, and those are a lower priority as well. But when we have some time after we've got done clearing the city streets and the city sidewalks, if we have additional time, we will employ some of our folks to go out and help with some of those DOT sidewalks and bike paths.
Thank you.
Any other questions, City Manager? Councilman Glendenning?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I just have it's 3 questions, and it's for a future discussion. I noticed on the borough agenda, there was ordinance 2020-45 in regards the Kenai Peninsula Borough Title 20 subdivision overview. And there's a couple things that perhaps impacted the city, and I would say not in a negative way. One was how long someone can ride on a preliminary plat and still not be forced to come to fruition. And then also the idea that maybe the cities can take on some of the planning documentation for plats and such. The reason I'm mentioning this is because we are not going to have a planning commission member next year. It's in the plan not to have it. It's imperative that we do. And so we should maybe just have a thought that maybe we could go our own way, or help prepare some legislation where they could perhaps put off implementing a reduction of our participation in the Planning Commission until such time the census comes out, and we're told that it won't be until into the fall. But it's something that's very, very important to me that we do have representation on the Planning Commission. Without beating a horse, we are a significant economic contributor and a population center, and we simply must have a presence there. And then also the anadromous waters protection rewrite of KBP 21-18-072 limited commercial activities. I saw the final report from the committee, and I'm hopeful that the final resolution interpretation of this won't put any of our bluff erosion considerations and project at hostage. All the questions will be laid to rest, and we'll have a path forward so we can make our plans without having a bureaucracy interfere with what we've been trying to do for 40 years. And those are my questions. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel.
Yep.
I didn't hear a question.
Yeah. That's.
Yes, I'd asked for a report on the ordinance 2024-45, how it impacts us, and I gave 2 examples of how it might. And then we will not have a planner. Can we get some legislation going? Can we find out a way, a path forward for this? And then my question on the anadromous habitat protection rewrite, is that in place so we will not be impacted by a arbitrary decision by a parallel or other government entity that could forestall our successful completion or conclusion of the bluff erosion project?
So I guess, are you expecting an answer next meeting or right now, or?
No. This next meeting.
Yeah,
This
okay,
is,
very
yeah,
good.
this is in the future. This is not tonight.
Okay, I think that's what, I saw Mr. Ostrander was jotting down.
I thought I prefaced it saying this is for future. These are my concerns, my questions, and just giving you a heads up.
Very good. Any other questions of the city manager? Seeing none, we'll move to the city attorney, Mr. Bloom.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel, members of council. I don't have anything to report, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions of the city attorney? Seeing none, we'll move to the city clerk, Ms. Hines.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel, members of council. Last week, Megan and I participated in virtual Laserfish conference. We've typically attended that in person, back and forth. So we appreciate the opportunity to be able to do that. We were both able to do it this year because of the reduced, obviously no travel costs. So just wanted to thank you for the opportunity to do that. And other than that, I have nothing else to report, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions of the city clerk? Councilmember Naxton.
Yeah, Jamie, it came to our attention that you've reached the peak of clerkdom, whatever, and could you explain what that is and what the level is, and go into some detail about it? Talk about yourself and what that is, because I think it's pretty significant. If you're asking me to do it, I'll, but go for it.
Ms. Hines.
Thank you, Councilmember Naxton. Yes, I achieved my Master Municipal Clerk designation, I think the end of last month. I began the process when I became Deputy Clerk in Haines back in 2008. or 2009. Became a certified municipal clerk after 4 years of training and work in 2012, and then was out of the clerk world for a little while, but started on the master municipal clerk when I became deputy clerk here at the city. In 2016 was the first conference that I attended with the city that I started collecting points on that. And so then it's taken until now to actually get it. So the the International Institute of Municipal Clerks has the certified municipal clerk track and a master municipal clerk track. It's comprised of points with both education and social participation, where you can be on committees, or some people choose to. It's not one I did, but do a presentation at a conference, or taking trainings, going to conferences, just gathering points, either socially or professionally, or it was like 120 points, I think. So that is, I'm at the master level now, but I think there's discussion about like a beyond the MMC track to continue, so that people are encouraged to continue getting CEUs every year to keep building and staying current. So is that sufficient?
Well, what else should I ask?
No, very, very cool. Yeah, we were made aware of that, and congratulations.
Thank you, and thank
most
you for the
definitely.
gift and the card.
Yes, absolutely. Councilman Glendon.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, we're coming into the budget cycle, so make sure you ask for enough funding so that this can happen. All right?
Yep.
Yeah, we treasure your commitment, your response, and how you're bringing your partner along, and we're in a good place in Clerk World. Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other questions of the city clerk? Seeing none, we'll go to additional public comment. Is there anybody from the general public that would like to address the council at this time? Nothing online. Ms. Hutchinson?
If you wanted to speak to council, can you unmute or raise your hand?
Seeing none, we'll move to council comments. Councilmember Askin.
I just want to thank everybody for continued good work with the administration. The other thing is, over the past month, I've had the opportunity to have some national meetings, Zoom meetings with my work, and of course, questions always come up about mandates and how we're doing with the COVID, and there's a lot of envy about how we approached the response, and that we're still having open meetings, and the people that have been locked down, they're pretty envious that we're moving along and, practically normally, and it's been nice to hear. So I appreciate that.
Thank you. Councilmember Denny.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I was just noted with interest Councilor Malloy's approach to the question of how we conduct our meetings and such, and it reminded me of a request that our city manager had early on, that maybe we have like committee meetings as the borough does. Of course, everybody has a day gig on Wednesdays or whatever day it would be. So this was a good approach that we could perhaps in committee setting set some parameters, desires, and be more efficient in our approach for some legislation that you're approaching, and thank you for doing that. And I'm really heartened by the response that we're getting from our voucher programs. People that know me, they stop me in the street. Everybody seems to have a little spring in their step. When I was at the chamber today, there were lots of people lined up, and all of them had a buzz of excitement about it. And I think just to let people know that in some way, some small way, they're being looked after, cared for, and thought about, I think will reveal amazing results from our citizens, from our taxpayers, for any initiatives that we may have in the future, maybe requiring participation, public participation for bluff funding or however it goes. We have the opportunity, and we've taken the opportunity to take care of those that perhaps just might need a little help with the cash flow, and also with our merchants. Just the concept of increasing the velocity of money through our economy will greatly produce benefits for how we look at our books come budget time. So I think we're on a good path, and we had a good meeting tonight, and we'll just go forward and have frank, thorough discussions in the future, and someday these, as Councilor Nack said, forecast, these lines will be picked up, these signs will be up, and I won't be at the little kids' table anymore. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Petty.
Yes, I had the privilege to attend the chamber meeting today, the luncheon. It's the first one that I've had the privilege to attend since all of this emergency orders have been in place, and it was good to see old friends and meet new friends. And it was an honor to hear the city's report from the mayor and the city manager, and the transparency that was given to the whole community, and how we led the way in getting our resources to our businesses so that our city could remain viable. And I'm thankful that I could just play a small part in that. And so it was, thank you for all the comments tonight, and that ends my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Winger.
Thank you. So I was asked to speak about this tonight. March is Women in History Month, and I was asked to speak to that. So just a few things on Women in History Month. In 1881, Clara Barton established the Red Cross. We know how important Red Cross is in our community, the nation as a whole. In 1912, the Girl Scouts of America was established. They promoted social welfare by encouraging members to participate in community service and outdoor activities. And one reason why I really want to highlight that is because they are selling Girl Scout cookies. Make sure you order. It is really hard for them to do this right now. Their sales have been impacted on their cookies. In 1920, women in the United States were given the right to vote on August 18th of 1920 through the ratifying of the 19th Amendment. I think that's a key thing, since in 2018, Saudi Arabian women earned the right to drive. So just to kind of put that in perspective where we are to other countries. In 1942, women were able to start serving in the armed forces in World War II through the Women's Army Auxiliary Corps, which recruited 150,000 women who did jobs such as radio operators, mechanics, lab techs, just to name a few. And in 1994, Congress passed a Violence Against Women Act that included domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking. So as we've came a long way in rights for women, we also still have things that work against us. Domestic violence rates are still at the all-time highest with women. In 2013, there was a survey done. 3 out of 10 women on the Kenai Peninsula had experienced sexual violence or physical violence. So we know that those numbers have gone up. We can't do enough to stamp out domestic violence. I would really like to see the city do a campaign where we do posters that are put in public places, all of our public facilities, making people aware of human trafficking, domestic violence, numbers, resources they can call. And again, this goes into play. We have women across our state that go missing in alarming high rates. We have a woman by the name of Douthit that's been missing for well over a year from our fellow Homer area. So as we've made big strides in our rights, we still see areas where we can do better. Domestic violence is definitely one of them. I would like to see us do a campaign that stomps that out or helps to give more resources. Again, this is a big month. There's a lot more that in our history that we've accomplished and have done, but I just really wanted to put key that we were able to vote before they were able to drive in Saudi Arabia, and I think that's a big, huge thing. And we have 3 women on our council, which some women in other countries aren't able to serve in their government fields. So this is a big stride for us, and I thank you for serving and being part of the community.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Maloney.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel, and thank you, Councilmember Winger, for your comments on Women in History Month. Just a couple of related comments. You know, you mentioned stalking, and in our state law on stalking, I think, is really inadequate because it requires the victim to prove that the perpetrator basically committed a crime of physical assault that put them or a family member in fear of injury or death, which is not your common understanding of what stalking is, you know. So that's something that the legislature should fix. And then as far as the city, I just want to point out that you know, in 1982 or 1983, I'm not sure what it was, but the city donated property on to the what became the Lee Shore Center, you know, to support the building of the Lee Shore Center there. So that's something very positive that the city did. But I'm also looking forward to and was really happy to get the memo from the city manager. Not that I don't appreciate, you know, all that the Boys and Girls Club did, but for the city to, you know, take back the management of that, and I'm looking forward to also programs being added, as Councilmember Winger indicated, you know, because a lot of activities for adults and seniors sort of kind of went away over time, and I know there's that need, you know, beyond, you know, with wrestling and beyond wrestling. Also, I wanted to, you know, again express my appreciation for all our discussion about how we participate in meetings. I think it's important, you know, for us to have kind of a consensus. So I'm hoping that, you know, whatever does come forward, we'll work together and come to consensus about how we want to conduct everything that we're doing, because I think that's important for us as a body. Also, I want to you know, commend our mayor and city manager for their really great presentation at the chamber today. You know, the members that were there were really engaged in the discussion. The banner clips, you know, when they got to the Kenai is a great place to Alaska, you know, and then also to grow a business. The banner clips and the video went really well. It was really smooth. So that was great. And I also wanted to thank you know, everybody you know, out in the public that has been you know, spending their money in Kenai. All our residents and visitors you know, that have been doing there that you know, gave us what the city manager reported as the 5.71% overall growth in sales tax over 2019, you know, which is really incredible considering what we've gone through. And then to also thank the collectors of the sales tax and remitters, and there was a lot of them there, so I was able to thank them personally, you know, during the meeting for, you know, doing that, because they're all important to the city. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Knoxton.
Thank you. Everything Bob said, but Really, but specifically, I wanted to thank the mayor and the city manager for their presentation at the chamber today. I had an idea it was going to be a good report and kind of what was going to be in it, but what I really did appreciate was the presentation itself was very well done, and you did a lot of preparation, obviously, and then everything on the screen and everything for the audience. It went really well.
Thank you.
Thank you for your good work on that. And let's see, this last weekend, I got my first COVID shot at Beacon. I think it was one of the last ones there, but I was fortunate to get that. So I'll be getting my next one here not too much longer. So as we kind of move forward, that's good. And there's a whole lot more vaccines coming into our area too for everybody. So hopefully that'll continue. We'll get to that herd immunity and all this will go away. But I guess the one thing that is be a concern for me is once we do go back to normalcy, I can watch Jim Glendenning and what he's up to right there at the kid table. So I know what he's up to. Up here, it's not as clear. But, well, I'll probably have to adjust back. Thank you.
I'm kind of liking it here.
Thank you. Tonight, we have no executive sessions or pending items. See no other business before this body, we are adjourned.